The story begins in North Korean, an unexplored region. At this time, a group of martial artists were gathered, chatting among themselves. Among them, a young man stood looking around in bewilderment. Just then, an older man carrying 2 cups of water stepped forward and greeted him. "Hey, young man, is this your first time participating?" Hearing that, the young man hesitated slightly, took a cup, and nodded in admission, "Yes. I've been into gates and dungeons before, but this is my first time in this land, so I'm a little nervous." Seeing that, the older man laughed heartily, "Haha. Then you should steel yourself. Places like this have been abandoned for hundreds of years, so they're certainly crawling with monsters. There might even be ancient beasts, who knows?" As he spoke, the older man sat down beside the young man. Then, as if remembering something, the youth turned and asked, "But, our expedition leader is from the prestigious martial family Lee, right? I heard he's the clan chief's brother, so he must be very strong." Hearing that, the older man glanced at a man sitting nearby and shook his head with a mocking laugh. "You mean him? He's just an illegitimate child. He's so weak they expelled him from the clan." The man he was looking at was about 40 with a sullen face, looking no different from an unemployed person. This was the 9th legitimate son of the prestigious martial Lee family, Lee Cheol. Looking at Cheol's somewhat shabby appearance, the older man continued, "Not only is he incompetent, he clearly lacks perseverance. That's why at his age he's only reached level 7 in martial arts. How could we rely on someone like that?" At that moment, a man in black stepped up to Cheol and reminded him, "Expedition leader, let's move on." Hearing someone call him, Cheol only lifted his eyes to glance at him briefly, then bowed his head again and whispered, "All right." After that, the group quickly packed up and continued forward. However, for some reason Cheol felt uneasy about the trip. Walking, he thought, "The Black Trade Company is under the command of the Lee family's head, they ought to protect me. But it doesn't seem that way. I have a bad feeling about this." Cheol silently warned himself. In his mind he began to recall his origins. "I once carried hopes and dreams. The moment I realized the pressure of being part of the Lee martial family was also the moment I was chosen by the top divine weapon during the divine arms selection ritual. Back then I thought that if I kept learning and working hard, one day I would earn everyone's recognition. However, that never happened." It all began when Cheol was about 7 or 8. A family physician pointed at an ultrasound photo on the wall and explained, "Look here, I've never seen mana like this before. Mana like that isn't suitable for studying magic. And if you force martial training, it's very difficult to stabilize." Given Lee Cheol's condition, reaching rank 9 would be nothing short of a miracle. Hearing that, Cheol's father simply sighed, then quietly looked out the window in disappointment. That was the moment everything changed. When people learned about my condition, they assumed my selection by the divine weapon had been a coincidence, or simply a mistake. Still, I gave it my all. I wanted to prove him wrong. I reached level 7 at 25. I was truly overjoyed then, even though my brothers had reached that level when they were young. But that joy didn't last long, because I was expelled from the clan when I turned 30. If not for my eldest brother, I might have been left for dead after leaving the clan. Since then I've been running. It's been 10 years since that time. The era of chaos had arrived. The unexplored regions were expanding, and the monsters were rapidly evolving. My father, hailed as the pinnacle of the martial world, the clan head of the Lee martial lineage, had passed away. Not long after this news spread in the papers, a group of hooded figures came to find me. Seeing them, I immediately frowned and demanded, "Black Trade Company, how did you find me?" Across from me, the men in black said nothing. Instead, they handed me a letter and intoned, "This decree is for you." Back in Cheol's perspective, seeing that the Black Trade Company ignored his question, he sighed and mocked himself, "Haha, they're just going to ignore my question. So I can never escape this cursed bloodline." Thinking that, he quickly read the letter and began to grasp the situation. Clan head Lee Gunsong, has third brother become the clan head? What about my elder brother? Cheol wondered inwardly, but before he could form a thought, the men opposite spoke again, "We will meet in 1 hour." With that, they turned and left. Seeing this, Cheol clenched the letter and hurriedly asked, "Wait. What happened to my elder brother?" The Black Trade Company remained silent and gave no answer. Seeing that, Cheol pressed on, I haven't even drawn a sword in 10 years. So why are you ordering me to investigate the unexplored region? At this, one of the men in black seemed slightly angered. He glared back at Cheol and said, "So you intend to refuse this task?" As he spoke, he subtly tightened his hand on the sword at his side. Cheol shuddered, realizing that refusing without a valid reason meant certain death. With no choice, he accepted. "It's not like that. I'll do it." Hearing the reply, the Black Trade Company seemed satisfied and vanished like a gust of wind. Once they were gone, Cheol clenched the paper in anger and ground his teeth. Those bastards. Returning to the present, Cheol's group, after traveling through the forest for a while, suddenly came upon a vast, decayed building that left the young man astonished. Huh? An abandoned building? It's actually pretty well preserved. Beside him, the man in black suggested, "Let's go inside." So the group drew their weapons, gripped them tightly, and slowly entered the house, scanning the surroundings as they moved, the sight before them making their skin crawl. Inside the house lay piles of bones, both human and monstrous. What the hell is this? The corpse of an ancient beast. Someone shouted. Before they could find an answer, a man in black shouted, eyes wide, "Begin the operation." At once, the two men in black on either side charged forward. The young man, still not understanding, had his head severed. The event unfolded so fast the martial artists couldn't react and cried out, "What are you doing?" A cold-voiced assassin answered, "You all knew you were dead from the start. You should consider it an honor to die for the clan." Saying that, he brandished his weapon and lunged at the older man, but what he didn't expect was that before he could finish off the man in front, a sword plunged through his chest from behind, wielded by none other than Cheol. He asked them coldly, "Who is behind this?" Up ahead, the assassin replied calmly, as if unaware of pain, "The clan head is behind this. We were ordered to bring you here, well, of course, that is if you didn't resist." As he spoke, he reached out and crushed the sword protruding from his body. Next, the large wound on his chest began to heal at a rate visible to the naked eye. This left Cheol unable to believe his eyes. Seizing the opportunity, the older martial artist immediately circled behind him to strike. Unfortunately, his martial skill was still somewhat lacking. Before his attack could be launched, the assassin casually swung his sword backward, cleaving the elder's body in two. Fresh blood spattered everywhere, filling the air with the metallic stench of blood. After doing this, the assassin glanced at Cheol with a mocking look, "Pathetic. I thought you'd be much stronger, especially with half your bloodline coming from the Lee Marshall family." Saying that, he lunged forward like a flash of lightning. He delivered a kick straight to Cheol's chest. The blow forced a mouthful of blood from him and sent him flying backward like a cannonball. His body slammed into countless walls and piles of bones before finally coming to a stop. Yet, in that moment of extreme danger, Cheol's mind was oddly calm. He reminded himself, "I can't die like this. I need a weapon." With that thought, Cheol swept his gaze around. Very quickly, he spotted a long sword embedded in the spine of a giant corpse that had long since died. "There, that sword is strong enough to kill a monster this size. If I use it, I might have a chance. Please, come on." Without a moment's hesitation, Cheol grabbed the sword and pulled it free. But for some reason, as the sword was drawn it slowly dissolved into a stream of black smoke. Seeing this, Cheol's eyes went vacant and he muttered like a soulless man, "Why?" At the same time, the assassin's voice rang out right behind Cheol, "I can't imagine a person from the Lee family being this pathetic. So at least let me send you off as one who bears the Lee name." With that, he swung his sword in a swift arc, creating a red streak that cut across Cheol. The protagonist lost all strength and collapsed forward. Only one bitter thought remained, "Heaven is so cruel. Am I really going to die like this? My whole life I've been running, tasting countless failures, and this is the end. If I had a chance to live again, I would." At that thought, Cheol's gaze went pitch black. Yet his consciousness hadn't completely faded. A streak of light began to appear within the darkness. Then a familiar voice sounded, "Is this Yujung's child? What happened to Yujung?" Beside him, a man dressed like a steward replied, "When we found her, she had," his voice faltered. Back in Cheol's perspective, the familiar voice and faces filled him with nostalgia. That voice, is it my father's? But, he's dead, isn't he? Wait, he looks so young, and not just him, Steward Choi looks the same. Father. Steward. Cheol reached out, but what he saw were unusually tiny hands. The reason was simple, he was in the state of a newborn. Staring at his tiny hands, Cheol even wiggled them a few times to make sure he hadn't misseen. He wondered, what happened? I should be dead. Is this the afterlife? Or just a memory? Unaware of his son's thoughts, his father, Lee Tae-shin, addressed the steward. Young would be a suitable name for him right now. Like the other children, arrange a maid and a few shadow sword team members to protect him, and have him participate in the sword selection ritual with Miss Bat. His words surprised the steward, who asked again, immediately. But he's not ready yet. Besides, Miss Bat is a few months older than him. The steward's words made Tae-shin ponder for a moment. Then he shook his head and said, it doesn't matter. I'll go ahead. After saying that, he cast a glance at Cheol, which startled him, and then he quickly left the room. Only after he had fully departed, could Cheol finally exhale in relief. Phew, it really was father. Though it had been a long time since they'd met, the pressure from him was the same as ever. So what is going on? This feels far too real to be just a memory, and that conversation earlier, that really happened. Even if I don't want to believe it. But if this is true, have I really regressed back to that damned moment? The more he thought, the more absurd it all seemed to our protagonist. Time passed quickly. A few months after Cheol's regression, today was the great day for the Lee martial clan, the sword selection ritual. The clan's descendants would reveal their talents through the weapons that chose them. In the past, his father had been chosen by dozens of swords and became the strongest swordsman of his generation. His older brother had been chosen by sword, tome, and staff, earning renown across the land for his swordsmanship and magic. This time, it was his turn. At this moment, Cheol wore an extremely elegant outfit. However, it made him somewhat uncomfortable. Yet a maid, looking at his appearance, squinted and praised, "Oh my! Young master, you look so handsome today. Even in a strange place you didn't cry at all, so mature." This girl was Cheol's maid, Moon Gawa. She reached out, lifted Cheol into her lap, and continued, "I'm sure the young master will get a good result. Your future will surely be brilliant." On this side, Cheol looked at her face and unconsciously smiled. In his eyes flickered some memories of his previous life. Maid Gawa was like a mother to him, but because of the siblings' jealousy, she had been expelled. She was the only one who cried over her loneliness and always stayed by his side. But this time, I won't let that happen again. I'll protect her at all costs. This action surprised her a bit, but she hugged him tighter. Then, at that moment, someone came over and reminded them both, "Young Master Young, everything is ready." Hearing that, Gawa turned to Cheol and said, "Shall we depart now?" In a different development, Steward Choi stood behind Tae-shin and reminded him, "Everything has been prepared." In response, clan head Tae-shin turned and nodded, "All right. Then let's depart." Thus, the procession quickly moved to a certain area. It looked like an arena. Atop the competition ground stood countless weapons planted upright, while many guests filled the surrounding stands to watch the ceremony. They looked toward Cheol and whispered, "That child. The bastard brought back from outside." In another corner of the stands, the clan's important members were also present. The young lady seated there was the clan matriarch. Her name was Baek Hwan. The long-haired man beside her was the chief steward, Lee Jae-hong. Next was the clan's firstborn son, Lee Gun-song. And finally, the clan's third son, Lee Myang-jung. At this moment, while everyone was quietly watching and judging Cheol, Myang-jung suddenly spoke up, "It's still too small. Don't you remember we took part in this ritual at that age? Right, Gun-song?" he said, glancing at his younger brother sitting beside him. To that, Gun-song replied coldly, "Yeah, probably. I don't know where it fell from," he said with an expressionless face, though he felt a bit intrigued inside. Cut to the arena. Tae-shin then announced loudly, "The weapon selection ritual begins. Bring Hwa out." Hearing this, a girl hurriedly carried a little girl forward. This little girl's name was Lee Hwa, the 8th child of the clan. Tae-shin set the child down, propping her against a chair. Then reached into his inner pocket and took out a dagger, and ran it across the tip of her small finger. A few drops of blood immediately welled up, causing the girl to burst into loud tears. But oddly, when those drops fell, they emitted a blue light, which headed straight toward the weapon set out in the distance, and a silver-white sword among those weapons suddenly began to glow. Witnessing this, the onlookers gasped, "Wow! That's the sacred relic sword, the most prestigious sword, a true masterpiece. Generations have passed and it has never chosen anyone." Paying no heed to the chatter, Tae-shin immediately reached for the sword, using his power to draw it into his hand. Once he had the sword firmly in his grasp, Tae-shin gently hugged his little daughter and said, "From now on, the sacred sword will belong to Wa." Hearing this, the middle-aged ladies nearby voiced their congratulations. "Congratulations, young miss. Another genius has been born into the clan. Today truly is a great day." Receiving the praise, the clan matriarch, Lady Baekhyuan, smiled warmly and softly thanked them. However, her expression darkened when she heard Tae-shin continue speaking. "And next, Young's ritual will begin." The moment he finished, the crowd's enthusiasm seemed to drain away. Instead, they began to whisper doubts to one another. "He's the illegitimate child brought from outside, right? TSK. Why would they let someone like that take part in the ritual?" Ignoring the murmurs, Tae-shin seated Cheol against a rock, then pricked the tip of his finger with the dagger, just as he had done with Wa earlier. But because Cheol retained the mind of an adult, he didn't cry like the girl did. This pleased Tae-shin somewhat. He softly said, "I feel very proud of you." Saying that, he patted Cheol's head as praise. Yet Cheol felt a bit anxious inwardly. He thought, "So this moment has come. In my previous life, I was chosen by the Vong Ton sword, a heavenly grade blade." Thinking that, Cheol reached out and let the small drops of blood fall down. Cut to the stands above. At this moment, Chief Steward Jae-hong glanced at Lady Baekhyuan with a cold expression and pondered. Judging by her look, it seems the eldest sister-in-law is not pleased. After all, it's the hidden bloodline of the eldest brother, which makes sense. That child truly has a harsh fate. Bearing the title of secondary son and trying to survive in the Lee clan will likely be anything but easy. Perhaps it's because those stubborn old men, trapped in a scheme of pure bloodlines, that things turned out this way. Thinking that, Chief Steward Jae-hong sighed with regret. At the same time, as if reading his thoughts, an old man behind him stroked his beard and said with a laugh, "It seems the steward takes quite an interest in a secondary son." As he spoke, he glanced at Jae-hong with a look full of implication. This old man was the grand elder of the Lee clan. Hearing him, Jae-hong coldly glanced back and replied, "Greetings, grand elder." Still, in Jae-hong's eyes there was caution toward this crafty old man. He thought to himself, "This is someone who never reveals his true thoughts. In any case, I can't afford to be careless around him." Unaware of Jae-hong's thoughts, the old man Cheol-jun cheerfully continued, "Is that the child the master brought back from outside?" Jae-hong answered without even looking at him, "Yes. I heard the spirit sword core found and protected him." Cheol-jun had known about this for some time, yet he still asked aloud, Puzzling. I can't predict the master's thinking. How could a secondary son of unknown origin and unclear circumstances take part in the selection rite? The selection rite has no real meaning for a secondary son. That has been proven clearly by the steward's past experience, hasn't it? The old man's words, dripping with sarcasm, made Jae-hong's face harden. His hand clenched and trembled as he demanded, "What did you just say?" Hearing that, Cheol-jun hurried to amend his words, though his sly tone didn't soften. "Oh, my rudeness. It's just that the steward, someone born outside, was famously never chosen by any weapon in previous selection rites. A secondary son is a secondary son, after all. Better know your place." Saying that, he gave a mocking smile. By now, even a Buddha would be somewhat angered. How could Jae-hong sit idly by while being insulted like this? He ground his teeth and shouted, "Enough. I won't endure such outrageous insults any longer." Before the words even left his mouth, a brilliant flash of light suddenly flared in the distance, leaving both Jae-hong and Cheol-jun dumbstruck. Jae-hong was so astonished he rose from his seat, widening his eyes to get a better look. Beside him, Cheol-jun's face looked as if he'd just lost money, bewildered. What is this? How could this happen? He muttered, while Steward Jaehong's face brimmed with joy. He couldn't help bursting into laughter. Ha ha ha. Even witnessing it firsthand, I still feel like I'm dreaming. Now, to their eyes, every weapon on the arena simultaneously shone, radiating a blinding light. Even masterpiece weapons like the famed Blood Spirit Spear or the Iron Form Blade, and even sacred relics like the Ma-Holy Sword or the Holy Thunder Responding Dragon, all of them reacted to Cheol, accepting the boy as their next master. This stunned the entire audience into silence, and within seconds a cacophony of frantic screams erupted. How is this possible? This is absurd. Not only the ritual weapons, but even weapons with existing owners are reacting. On this side, even the sword of the clan's firstborn, Myeong-young, began to glow. It trembled continuously in response to Cheol, leaving Jaehong with only a puzzled smile. Haha, how can this happen? Gunsong, do you believe what you're seeing? It seems our ninth brother possesses a talent beyond what we imagined. In reply, Gunsong remained as cold as ever and acknowledged, it is as you say. Elsewhere, the guests who came to watch the ceremony continued to murmur, isn't something wrong here? This outcome can't come from a secondary son. Damn it. The selection right absolutely can't be wrong. Turning to the clan head Taishin's perspective, faced with such chatter he shouted loudly, silence. According to clan rules, any weapon that chose Young must belong to him. However, handling this matter simply may not be easy. Therefore, I want to hear everyone's opinion. In response, Chief Steward Jaehong raised his hand and spoke his mind. I have a proposal. Regardless of clan rules, I believe gifting all these weapons would go against the meaning of the selection right. The selection right is a tradition that must be preserved for future generations. So why not let the ninth young master choose a single sword from among them himself? What do you think? To clan head Taishin, this was an offer he couldn't refuse, so without much thought he agreed immediately. Not bad, that suggestion will be accepted. Saying that, he snapped his fingers, directing the weapons that already had owners to fly toward the arena. Then he used his energy to gently guide Cheol's body forward, who was sitting in front, and spoke softly. Now, son, pick whatever you desire. From Cheol's point of view, he saw all the weapons radiating shimmering light before him, leaving him dazed. He wondered why everything was different from before he reset. But in any case, this was clearly a good opportunity for him. So he would make use of the whole situation. With that thought, Cheol crawled forward swiftly. He crawled past the lineage sword of true dragon Braha without any intention of stopping. Even weapons of destructive, immense power, like the sacred spear white scenery, forged using part of a saint's body to slay super beings, failed to catch his attention. There were also the staff Valheim, made from a branch of the world tree where spirits dwell, and the spirit moss sword, forged when the moon, sun, and stars aligned. All were great weapons waiting for Cheol to choose. However, he did not hesitate for long. Cheol reached out and touched a certain sword, as if with prior intent. Behind him, clan head Taishin could not hide his surprise when he saw which sword Cheol had chosen. That sword was the blade the Li clan's ancestor had found in untamed, uncharted lands. For generations, no one had been able to awaken its latent power. The sword lay quietly in darkness, covered in the dust of time. Its name was Black Knight. Based on known attributes, this sword did not qualify as upper heaven tier. However, because of its connection to the clan founder, it was always kept alongside upper heaven weapons. To this day, no predecessor had ever been inscribed as choosing it. Was this merely the meaningless choice of an infant, or would it be the beginning of a new great destiny? Taishin whispered so quietly only he could hear. Then, after Cheol selected the sword for himself, he drew the boy and the blade toward him, and declared, Li Young has chosen Black Knight. Thus the ritual is officially concluded. At the same time, up in the stands, the clan matriarch, Baek Yuan, when she saw Cheol choose that sword, a streak of murderous intent flashed across her face, making others shudder. Secondary son Li Young, another nuisance has entered the clan. If he becomes an obstacle, then he must be eliminated. Time flew by. Before they knew it, 9 years had passed. By now, our protagonist Cheol was 9 years old. Inside a villa, he called out loudly, Nurse, I'm heading to afternoon training. Hearing that, Gawa hurriedly ran after him. Oh, let me walk you part of the way. And so the two of them went together. Cheol felt slightly embarrassed and scratched his cheek. I can go by myself. Gawa replied with a question, but, sir, the other training grounds are all empty. Why are you insisting on the first ground? Isn't that place too old? To that question, Cheol offered little explanation, only smiling softly and saying calmly, someone's waiting for me there. Cheol's answer made Gawa mutter in surprise, someone's waiting. Then, at that moment, a sudden shout drew both their attention, that's not it. Gawa stopped, glanced to the side, and exclaimed in surprise, oh. It looks like someone's at the 7th ground. Inside the 7th practice ground, a little girl was vigorously practicing swordplay under the guidance of some master. Gripping the sword too tight will injure your hand. Now, slash down one more time. Yes, sir. The girl shouted back. This girl was Li Hua, the Li clan's 8th young mistress, who had participated in the sword selection ritual with Cheol when they were young. Outside, seeing this, Cheol shrugged and said, so it's the 8th young mistress. Behind him, Maid Gawa hurriedly reminded him, you should call her sister, milord. If anyone hears, it'll cause a fuss. Her voice full of worry. Cheol, hearing this, only felt amused inwardly, we're only 5 months apart, what sister? Ignoring the two of them, inside the training hall the instructor's barking voice continued, always swing the sword as if you're controlling your own body. Do it again. Handle the blade carefully so you won't get hurt, once more. The constant reminders made Wa's head throb, she was so frustrated she trembled. And she threw the sword aside, master, why do you keep nagging? How you hold the sword doesn't matter, as long as you grip it firmly. Opposite her, seeing her frustration, the master quickly raised his hand to reassure her. Miss, all of this is for your sake. First, calm down and try again. This time you'll do better. He said this as he picked up the sword and handed it back to Wa. Outside, watching the awkward way an adult handled a 9-year-old, Cheol curiously asked, who's struggling over there? Hearing this, the courtesan Gawa was a bit surprised, but promptly answered, that's Beak-E Hyen, captain of the Black Dan squad. At that, Cheol couldn't hide the surprise in his eyes, a captain. For a 9-year-old to have a master like that is over the top. From behind, Gawa sensed a flicker of emotion in Cheol and, thinking he felt slighted for not having a mentor, she comforted him. Milord, a good master will soon appear and recognize your talent. It's my fault for being inadequate and not serving you properly. Miss Wa was raised on weaning gruel mixed with herbs. At that, Gawa's eyes began to well up. Cheol, hearing this, admonished with some irritation, really? There you go again. How much am I supposed to owe the nurse? I don't need people like that. They're only here because of the Li clan's status. Besides, I already have good masters. Cheol said confidently. Time passed quickly. Scene shifts to the Li clan's exclusive first training ground. This place symbolizes the long history of the Li clan. Various weapons and training dummies are arranged around it. However, it's somewhat worn and seems rarely used. For Cheol, upon entering this training area, he didn't bother with the surrounding equipment, no need to waste time. Currently, it's more symbolic than a true fighting arena. Even so, there was only one reason he came here, because this place preserves weapons older than any armory in the other training grounds. Thinking that, Cheol opened the storeroom door. Inside were countless swords propped against the walls. They were extremely old, rusted, and many bore numerous cracks along their blades. But Cheol paid it no mind. He glanced at a long sword not far away and walked over. Oh, found it. I'll try this one today. Saying that, he carried the sword to the training area. As he walked he thought, since 9 years ago, when I returned to this second life, an extraordinary change has occurred. Among those changes, the most astonishing was that I gained the ability to read the memories hidden inside weapons. Now, as Cheol's hand tightened on the blade and he focused his mind, suddenly a few unfamiliar images appeared in his head. He was standing in neat ranks with a group, swords in hand, and the instruction of an unknown man echoed, build a solid foundation. Whether high-level or low-level swordsmanship, the foundation is the same. From top to bottom, left to right, the memory comes through clearly like an unshakable pillar. Carve that foundation into your swords. As that voice sounded, Cheol slowly began moving his body. He told himself, this is the memory engraved within this weapon. The older and more refined a weapon is, or the longer and more fondly its owner used it, the clearer the memories from the past would appear. With a heavy swing from high to low, Cheol produced a tremendous blast. Shock waves burst outward, sending dust scattering in all directions. This was the first of the 7-star sword techniques, Red Gale. Seeing the result of the strike, Cheol couldn't hide the joy in his eyes. So the 7-star sword sequence is complete. Over the past 2 years, I've read almost all the memories of the weapons in the arena. At that moment, a clap of praise rang from behind him. Wonderful. It's been a long time since I've seen a 7-star sword executed so perfectly. Hearing the familiar voice, Cheol turned around, and saw that the one who had come was the steward, Jaehong. A bit of information about him flashed through his mind. The Lee clan steward, Lee Jaehong, is a 4th-rank warrior. Though born a secondary son, his strength earned him recognition and the current steward position. From my previous life until now, he is the only one in the clan who has truly cared for me. Thinking that, Cheol hastily bowed, greetings, uncle. Hearing this, Jaehong happily patted his head and praised, you can just call me uncle. You train every day without fail, that's commendable. Whenever I go to work and return, I always see you. As for Cheol, he'd already been through such discrimination once, so he no longer felt shy or inferior. I'm fine, uncle. After all, I carry the Lee bloodline. To prove by the sword, that's the meaning our clan name carries, and that's how I was raised. So I'll prove myself by my own strength. Cheol said, his face bright. This left Jaehong stunned for a moment. Then he sighed regretfully, sigh. How could a child like this be born into the status of a secondary son? He thought to himself, then cleared his throat and said, come to think of it, it won't be long before you reach the age for the naming ceremony. It's a bit late, but before that, I want to be your master. How does that make you feel? He said, pointing to himself. Poor uncle, he was a bit delusional, because Cheol awkwardly refused, I appreciate it, but I can't accept. On the other side, Jaehong felt as if he'd been struck by lightning. He hurriedly asked, what? Why? Aren't you pleased that I be your master? To answer, Cheol raised both hands calmingly, it's not that. Before the naming ceremony, you must not serve a master. It's the rule, and I don't want to put you in an awkward position. Cheol's words made Jaehong feel indignant on his behalf. But the other brothers openly broke that rule, trained under famous masters and were nurtured with all kinds of spirit medicines. Jaehong said as he gripped Cheol's shoulder tightly. Still, Cheol quietly shook his head in refusal. Just because a rule is widely ignored doesn't mean I shouldn't uphold it. And as I said before, I want to prove myself by my own strength. To Jaehong, Cheol's premature maturity made him somewhat doubtful. This child, is he really only 9? Those eyes, it's like I'm looking at my eldest brother. Thinking that, faced with Cheol's resolve, Jaehong didn't press further. It seems you don't intend to abandon this stubbornness, do you? Just like your father. Truly a stubborn fellow to the end, what a trouble. He sighed and continued, then is there nothing I can do as your uncle? If I do nothing for you, I feel uneasy. Is there anything else you need? Jaehong said with a smile, making Cheol's eyes light up. Thank you, uncle. I'll accept that offer. Cheol murmured inwardly, scratched his head, and made his request, actually, there's something I'd like to ask of you. I want to tour the vault's basement. Time passed quickly. To fulfill his nephew's request, Jaehong put him in a car and drove to the place known as the secret vault. Outside, 2 guards stepped forward, stopping their vehicle and said sternly, stop. Excuse us. Please verify your identity and state your purpose for visiting. Hearing this, Jaehong rolled down the car window and replied, I am Steward Lee Jaehong, doing a routine inspection. Then he presented his ID for the guards to confirm. He then pointed to Cheol sitting in the back seat, the companion is Lee Young, the youngest son of the Lee clan. I'm bringing him to look around. Seeing that, the guard glanced over and stepped aside to invite them in. Identity confirmed. Please proceed. Thus, after a brief procedure, Jaehong's car rolled onward into the interior. As for Cheol, he'd visited here in his previous life too. Still, now he had to act a bit to avoid suspicion. He told himself, now's the time to act childishly. With that in mind, Cheol's eyes brightened as he looked outside. Wow! So this is the vault. Seeing his reaction, Uncle Jae-hong laughed in disbelief. That excited, huh? Cheol replied with an extremely excited face, of course. The vault holds the clan's most precious treasures. When he said that, Cheol wasn't acting at all. His hands tightened with excitement. What I'm searching for is in there, legendary weapons, ancient artifacts that no one even knows whether they truly exist. Those who seek such fantasies usually receive one answer. Everything can be found inside the Lee clan's vault. Inside the hexagonal building, a sleek, modern structure shiny enough to serve as a mirror everywhere, the clan crest, 2 crossed swords, decorates the walls throughout. On this side, Uncle Jae-hong pressed the elevator button and said, the vault's basement stores weapons that have been sealed for various reasons. Hearing that, Cheol's eyes lit up and he asked, among them are those monster weapons that swallow their owners, right? Jae-hong nodded in answer. He even teased his nephew, that's right, you know it well. If you touch those weapons carelessly, they'll devour both your body and your mind. He said with a strange smile, causing Cheol's shoulders to twitch as if in fear. This made Jae-hong burst into amused laughter. Well? Scared now? Cheol answered with a brave face, not at all. Then the elevator doors opened. However, Jae-hong had no intention of entering and instead turned to instruct Cheol, don't worry. You can't go into dangerous places like that anyway. I have matters to handle upstairs, so take your time looking around. Yes, thank you, uncle. Cheol nodded and quickly stepped into the elevator. As soon as the elevator doors closed, his innocent, childlike demeanor completely vanished. He exhaled heavily from having to act for so long. Pretending to be an innocent child really wasn't easy. When the elevator doors opened, Cheol found himself facing a gleaming armory filled with countless different weapons. This was the vault's basement, also called the weapon grave, a place sealing countless weapons and artifacts. The reason I came here is simple, to find a particular weapon. It's called Infinity. It originally took the form of a short sword, but when infused with magic, Infinity can change its length, shape, weight, and even its properties at will. Before the reset, Lee Gunsong was the one who discovered Infinity inside the vault. Thanks to the sword's limitless transformations and overwhelming flexibility, he earned the title of the Ever-Changing. Because of that title, not the eldest brother, who had been a strong candidate for clan head, but the third brother Gunsong became the clan head. Then he found me, someone hiding in the shadows, and eliminated me without hesitation. That's all I know so far. To prevent that tragedy from repeating, I have something I must do. Though it will take time, I have no choice but to inspect everything one by one. This time, I must get Infinity before Gunsong. Cheol said, as black smoke began to seep from his palms. He then began scouring the armory. He touched each weapon one by one. Yet he still hadn't found Infinity. Not this one either. An hour has passed. I've checked every short sword that seemed suitable, but there's no sign of Infinity. Cheol sighed in frustration, but he quickly regained his spirits. Cheol scanned the area and thought, no, it has to be here. I haven't checked everything yet. This time I'll check that display case over there. With that, as he moved, Cheol's body bumped into a nearby table, causing a fully rusted short sword to fall to the floor. The sound it made on impact was far from quiet. Looking at the short sword's unusual shape, Cheol felt curious. So thick with rust like this? How could it possibly get this bad? As he spoke, Cheol reached his hand toward the sword. But at that very moment, the black smoke from his palm somehow oozed out and enveloped the sword. The black smoke was thicker and denser than ever, even cloaking Cheol's entire body, causing him to feel a surge of panic. What's happening? What's going on all of a sudden? Cheol whispered as his vision was swallowed by the black smoke. When Cheol finally came to his senses, he found himself on some unfamiliar battlefield. Around him were piled bodies as high as mountains. Where was this? Could this be a memory trapped inside this rusted short sword? This feeling is nothing like the memories I've read from other weapons. It felt as if I were truly present here, an astonishingly vivid sensation. Thinking that, Cheol glanced left and right. Then suddenly he got a chilling feeling that made his hair stand on end. This is bad. Cheol spun around and discovered a massive figure behind him staring straight at him. At that moment a thought flashed through Cheol's mind, an overwhelming presence so terrifying that even nature recoils. The apocalyptic monster that once arose from the blue hole long ago, devouring countless civilizations. Before Cheol stood a gigantic beast, its body mountain-sized, grotesque in shape, sprouting countless tentacles. It's hard to describe the creature's exact form. Facing it, Cheol's body trembled uncontrollably. His instincts screamed at him to run. I'm done for. I'm going to die. There's no way to beat that thing. I have to get out of here. Cheol thought as he slowly backed away, but then he tripped over something and collapsed to the ground. At the same time, footsteps sounded behind him. A stranger wielding a long sword was slowly advancing toward the giant monster. This left Cheol astonished. When did this person get behind me? He wondered. Then the stranger gathered his strength and shot forward like an arrow. He leapt high and charged to do battle with the giant. With a roar that shook the heavens, he unleashed a single sword strike to pierce the enemy. In an instant the blow left a streak of light across the creature's body, and a second later its form exploded into countless fragments, a rain of blood spilling through the sky. Meanwhile Cheol remained dazed, not yet understanding what had just happened. He mumbled, "Impossible. One slash and it was finished." Right. Where did that person go just now? Thinking that, Cheol scanned the area for the figure. At that moment, the warrior in front suddenly turned his head, stared at Cheol, and asked coldly, "Who are you?" The question made Cheol tremble. He thought, "Can he see me?" Up front, the unnamed warrior continued, "Why am I here? Out of compassion, I will send you off without pain." Saying that, he raised his sword above his head, and brought it down to strike at Cheol. At that moment, he jolted awake, freed from the illusion. Cheol began gasping, sweat pouring down his face, and the rusted sword had fallen right in front of him. What was that? What just happened? The crushing sensation still lingers all over my body. It felt so real. Cheol thought in confusion. Before he could find an answer, the short sword beside him started vibrating non-stop. Pale orange smoke began to spread from the blade, and in moments its form had completely changed. Seeing that, Cheol hurried over and picked up the sword to examine it. Could this be? It can't be wrong. I'll become the master of 10,000 arms. Thinking that, Cheol sliced the tip of his finger with his knife, letting a few drops of blood fall onto the blade. Immediately, the short sword flared with light, emitting a soft blue glow, as if accepting Cheol as its master. Unable to contain his excitement, he began to swing the sword. With each swing, the weapon's shape kept changing. From a short sword, it quickly lengthened into a long sword. With one more swing it transformed into a spear. Witnessing the change, Cheol had no doubts left. He murmured, "Found you. Mujin." Time passed quickly, Cheol kept practicing as usual. Still, he felt a bit discouraged. Sigh, failed again. A week has passed since I obtained Infinity, the Infinity sword I took from the underground armory that day. Right now I'm keeping it disguised as a ring to avoid detection. But that day, what exactly happened? That's right, that man. His cutting strike, it was as if to remind me I'm still not worthy. The dark energy revealed the technique along with its name. Not to mention its power, just the man's movement alone carried an elegant beauty. Still, no matter how hard I tried to imitate it, I couldn't reproduce it. Even so, I didn't feel impatient. In my previous life I was looked down on, not even taught the clan's basic techniques. It's only one move. But this is the first time I've encountered such an advanced martial technique. I can do it. I remember how that person moved in the memory, more clearly than anyone. Thinking this, Cheol's face suddenly went blank as he realized something. Wait, that man. I'm not a grown man like him. I'm just a 9-year-old child. If I try to copy an adult's movements exactly, of course I won't be able to bring out the full power. I have to accept this body, slowly, naturally, swing the sword in a way that suits me. With that thought in mind, Cheol slowly closed his eyes. He relaxed his body, raised the sword above his head, then suddenly clenched his hand and poured all his strength into a straight downward swing. The moment the blade's tip struck the ground, a thunderous sound rang out. The earth split into pieces, chunks of rock and soil flying like shrapnel. Chio looked at his result with satisfaction. Good. It seems I've got the feel of it. Now it's just a matter of applying magic power. Saying that, Chio's face grew thoughtful. No matter how many times I try to apply it within the memory, it still feels like an important piece is missing. I can't recreate it. What is it after all? I'll just have to keep experimenting. Okay, start over. Chio let out a sigh and continued practicing. But just as he pulled the sword back, the sword in his hand was suddenly gripped tight by the hand of a young girl. She asked gently, "Hey kid, where did you learn that technique?" To Chio, the girl's appearance was a bit puzzling. Jet black hair and brown eyes, she's definitely blood of the Lee clan. With that thought, Chio asked bluntly, "Who are you?" Across from him, the young girl's eyes showed slight surprise. Huh? You don't know me? Ah, true, you might not know. I don't show my face much, she said cheerfully. So, what's your name? Seeing her friendly attitude, Chio hesitated and replied, I'm Young. The moment she heard the name, the young girl grabbed Chio's hand and shook him like a doll. Young. What a unique name. Right, I'm Lee Jianhua. Nice to meet you. At Jianhua's introduction, Chio quickly realized who she was. This is the youngest Lee, Jianhua. According to Jaehong, she's a bit different from others, so grandfather couldn't accept it. Father told me that in my previous life. But beyond that, doesn't she consider her absurd power when playing with her nephew like that? Chio thought, glaring at Jianhua without saying a word. Jianhua only remarked casually, your body seems a bit weak, huh? Then she slowly stepped closer to Chio and cut to the chase. So, kid, where did you learn that technique? Chio wasn't about to foolishly answer, he fired back instead, why are you asking? Jianhua laughed and replied boastfully, that's an ancient martial art. I absolutely love old martial techniques. That was the era when monsters ran rampant, right? She said, pulling an old book from her sleeve, and handed it to Chio. So, this is a gift for you. A gift? Chio asked curiously. Jianhua nodded and urged, yeah. Open it and see. Seeing that, Chio didn't hesitate, he quickly flipped through the pages, skimming. The handwriting is terrible, so it's hard to read. But is this magic? It records not only magic but martial techniques too, at a pretty advanced level. I don't understand any of it. Maybe, the rumors about her were inaccurate. Pondering that, Chio hesitantly asked, what is this? Beside him, Jianhua saw her nephew didn't understand, so she stepped forward and explained, oh, this? These are ancient magics based on exposed mana. In the old days, magic used only the exposed mana in the body without a mana core, while modern magic relies on storing mana in the heart. But can ancient magic be dismissed as obsolete? Sometimes, the mana control techniques back then were superior to today's. Saying that, Jianhua pointed to the book in her hands. So I, the youngest, am researching amplification techniques and transformation arts. But, the remaining records are too scarce. Meanwhile, Chio felt a surge of interest about the topic. This is a perspective I never considered, the magic of infinity. With that thought, he blurted out, young, wait a moment. Then Chio ran off. Jianhua was left baffled. Next, somehow Chio produced a sword, gripped it with both hands, closed his eyes, and focused on directing the energy in his heart. Mana from the mana core spread throughout his body. But instead of absorbing mana back into the core, wait! That unnamed martial artist used exposed mana. The way the man used mana in the memory. I couldn't understand it before, but now I can. With that thought, a gleam appeared in Chio's eyes. He tightened his grip on the sword and swung down with all his strength. A deep slash appeared on the ground, sending chunks of earth and rock flying everywhere. Seeing that, Chio couldn't hide his joy. Success! He whispered. But at that moment, Jianhua suddenly lunged forward like she was being chased by a demon. She grabbed Chio's shoulder urgently and fired questions. What is that? That is, an amplification technique, right? Hearing that, Cheol felt a little embarrassed, glanced aside, and answered, yes, it's an amplification technique. What? Jainwa shouted, how did you do that? To which Cheol, not stupid, refused to explain. He just shrugged and said casually, I just could do it. Of course, Jainwa wasn't satisfied with that answer. She snapped irritably, I mean, how could you do it? Cheol frowned and shot back, why should I tell you? In response, Jainwa looked anxious, it's because you only knew how thanks to the notebook I gave you. I lived my whole life for this. I've been searching for it for over 10 years, even after being kicked out of the house. I'm begging you, she squeezed Cheol's hand, her gaze sincere as if pleading. If I do something for you, could you teach me? Cheol looked at Jainwa and sighed. All right. But you have to promise me 3 things. 3 things. First, Cheol said seriously, you must not tell anyone about me unless I permit it. That includes my eldest brother and my father. Why? Jainwa asked blankly. Cheol replied curtly, because I don't like people talking about me without my consent. At that, Jainwa suddenly fell quiet, her face a bit sad as if remembering something. Ah. I understand. I'm the same. Her expression made Cheol wonder. Why does she look so unhappy? Putting that aside, Cheol continued with the second demand. Second, you must not lie to me. We have to trust each other. I'll also be honest with you as far as I can. Hearing that, Jainwa hesitated a moment. But within seconds, she agreed, fine. So what's the last one? As for the last one, it is. The following part of the conversation is hidden by the author. Time passed quickly. A year later, the maid Gawa rushed over with a letter and urgently announced to Cheol, young master, young master. Inside the training yard, seeing her hurried figure, Cheol stopped his motion, and turned to ask, nurse, what happened to make you run all the way to the training ground? Opposite him, Gawa was almost out of breath but managed to say, here, look at this. Then she handed the letter to the protagonist, making Jainwa beside them a bit curious. But with memories from his previous life, Cheol already guessed what it was. He thought, finally, it's here. Inside the letter it read, summons, subject, 9th young master young, scheduled date, September 10th at 10 o'clock, content, participants in the naming ceremony must gather at the central arena before 10 o'clock on September 10th, note, anyone carrying items not on the permitted list will be severely punished. Representative, Housemaster Lee Myung-young. Seeing his eldest brother's name as the representative in the letter, Cheol grew curious. Representative is Housemaster Myung-young? Is father not home? I haven't heard any news of him going on campaign. Returning to Jainwa, for some reason she became so irritated she spat fire. A naming ceremony. Seeing that, Cheol didn't understand why she was acting so crazy, and asked, why are you suddenly so worked up? Explaining, Jainwa tore at her hair and said, everything is just getting started. This is the most important time. If you take part in the naming ceremony they'll keep you there. No. Don't go. Her stance was like an angry child about to lose a toy. Cheol couldn't help but shake his head in exasperation. It had been a year since the pact with the youngest. Since then, I've been studying magic with her. Modern magic focuses on primal mana, while ancient magic centers on exposed mana. Combining these two systems creates an entirely new kind of magic, the lifelong dream she wants to realize. Primal mana is used for storage and changing mana attributes, while exposed mana helps control and operate it. Thanks to that, my magical application skills have surpassed kids my age. Beside him, Jainwa kept muttering, giving Cheol a headache. This, really can't join, can it? Researching magic is more interesting. Hearing that, the protagonist didn't want to waste time and cut to the chase. You know you can't, right? Don't worry, even if time is a bit shorter, I'll keep training magic and restoring ancient magic. His words made Jainwa's eyes go wide, question marks seemed to sprout over her head. Huh? How can you do that? The naming ceremony training schedule will be brutal. She said, to which the protagonist replied with utter confidence. I'll do both at the same time. Time passed quickly. Now Cheol and Little Wa were in a room, notably both sitting inside a glass cage. In front of them, a man warned, "Today's training begins. First, endure magical strikes for 30 minutes. That man was the captain of the Blood Tiger Squad, trainer Jang Wook. Then the glass cage began spewing countless erratic electric bolts everywhere. However, before they could hit Cheol, an invisible barrier around him deflected them aside. Seeing that, Jang Wook's brow tightened and he pondered. Normally, the ninth young master, having had no basic training, would have collapsed from the shocks. But he countered them all with magic. Sensing Jang Wook staring, Cheol glanced back to observe him. That single look made Jang Wook startle and panic. That kid is testing me to gauge his own level and forcing trainers to teach at a higher level. A mere 10th-born child dares do that? Damn it. Call him a child? No, with that ability, calling him that is an insult to a martial artist. I need to examine myself. This is no longer simple pre-naming ceremony training, it's an opportunity to impart knowledge to him with full force. Thinking this, Jang Wook unconsciously clenched his fist. He felt a thrill at Cheol's enormous potential. Time flew. Cheol, exhausted, stretched after the electric shock exercise. Phew, finally done. This family is crazy. To build resistance to magic, they toss you into a mana-emitting device. Still, didn't expect them to be the ones to apologize first. Before he knew it, people's gazes toward him had changed. Anyway, time for a short break, Cheol muttered and hurried off. But things never went his way. At that moment, a shadow suddenly appeared beside him and struck from behind. Yet with vigilance and all the knowledge from his past life, Cheol easily swung to block the attack. The attacker was none other than Little Hua. Seeing her attack fail, she coldly ordered Cheol, "Hey, you lowborn, come out here for a moment." With that she tore her hand free from his. Cheol had no intention of obeying and retorted, "What are you playing at?" Cheol's blunt words immediately enraged Hua. She pointed at him and snapped, "Watch your mouth. I'm a legitimate child, you're just an illegitimate one. Besides, I'm a year older than you." From Cheol's perspective, he had no time to argue with a brat. Rather than waste time like that, he'd rather train or rest. So Cheol waved him off, "I don't have time to bicker with you." Saying that, he turned as if to leave, which drove Hua wild with anger. The girl immediately focused her mana into her fist and yelled, "Hey! Don't ignore me." Up ahead, Cheol felt the fluctuation of mana and spun around in alarm. She actually dared to use mana. I was planning to let this go, but I guess I should teach her a lesson. With that thought, he leaned to the side to dodge the punch. At the same time, while Hua hadn't yet pulled her arm back, Cheol's hand shot out swiftly. He grabbed Hua's pale throat and hoisted her up into the air. Then Cheol pulled her close and warned, "If you want to complain, go complain to your mother. Don't bother me, I'm busy." After saying that, Cheol sighed in annoyance and released Hua's collar. Meanwhile, realizing she couldn't beat Cheol, Hua started shouting, "It's all your fault. Because of the scandal you caused at the selection ceremony, I'm constantly compared to you. Know your place as an illegitimate child and shut up. This is so unfair. I train myself to exhaustion every day while you were born with talent. I don't want this either. But my mother." At that, Hua realized she'd said too much and hastily covered her mouth. As for Cheol, hearing this flipped him into a lecturing mode. "Blaming others, that's easy, isn't it? As you said, I'm an illegitimate child. That status doesn't grant me such luxuries. Can't sleep? Then don't sleep. Sneaking snacks but still falling behind? Then skip your main meals. If I annoy you, then do whatever it takes to beat me. Force me to apologize. That's the Lee family's way." With that, Cheol didn't want to waste more breath and strode off. Behind him, the girl Lee clenched her fist and shouted, "You brat, big talk. At the naming ceremony, I'll outperform you and make you call me sister. Kneel and beg. Remember that." Cheol turned and replied, "Sure, I'll wait and see." Time passed quickly into the afternoon. The scene shifts to the direct line training grounds, the 7th area. At that moment, the family's matriarch, Baek Yuan, arrived to visit her daughter. Seeing her, a nearby maid hurriedly bowed and said, "Madam has arrived." Baek Yuan replied with a cold expression, "Step aside. I have something to say to my daughter." Saying that, she walked straight into the training room. At that time, Hwa was still vigorously training on the dummies. Then Baek Yuan asked, "What are you doing?" The familiar voice startled Hwa and she turned around. "Mother. I'm training." She spoke with her gaze dropping slightly, as if she couldn't look Baek Yuan in the eye. As Hwa suspected, Baek Yuan had come to scold her. "I've heard about it. You're being dominated by that kid. I told you, if you can't suppress him, crush him." "It's disappointing. If you're training only out of fear of punishment, then stop." Opposite her, Hwa fell silent for a few seconds. Then she lifted her head, looked Baek Yuan in the face, and replied, "I know what you think about my training. But I do this because I want to. I'll defeat that boy, not because you ordered me to, but because I want to. I'll decide for myself." Seeing her determined look, Madame Baek Yuan quickly guessed something and murmured, stirred up by some unknown person, "You are the direct line of the Lee family. You and him were never the same from the starting line. Beating him is obvious, and yet you're letting yourself be provoked." Saying that, she took out a small glass vial, handed it to Hwa, and instructed, "This is Mi Mong. It's a type of potent poison. If you can't surpass him, then trample that boy. That's how the Lee family does things." With that said, she left the room, leaving Hwa standing there in a daze. Meanwhile, the maid Gawa wore a stunned expression as she stared at the computer screen. "No. This can't be." In front of her was the Lee family's website used to evaluate and rank the clan's disciples. It displayed the week 14 results: Lee Cheol, gender, male, mana arts, rank 1, weapon arts, rank 1, theory, rank 1, overall ranking, rank 1. Beside it, Cheol grinned boastfully, "Well, nurse? Less worried now." At that result, Gawa's worries vanished. She hugged Cheol excitedly and said cheerfully, "I didn't really do anything to help the young master, and yet you did this well." Cheol smiled back, "You've helped me a lot, don't say that." At that moment, heavy footsteps sounded outside, making them both turn and look at each other curiously. And a second later Jainwa came running in shouting, "Kid! Let's go train." Seeing her enthusiasm, Cheol awkwardly warned, "But I just finished training." "That's exactly why you have to keep going. Mana practice will help you feel less tired," Jainwa said, flexing her arm. "But such lines only fool ordinary kids, they won't work on someone who's lived decades like Cheol." "I've never heard that helps," he said, looking at Jainwa with skeptical eyes, making her a bit embarrassed and unable to meet his gaze. "Ah, really? It does?" Jainwa stammered. Putting that aside, Cheol remembered something and continued, "Sigh, fine. Anyway, I have something I want to show you." At that, Jainwa's curiosity piqued, then she suddenly widened her eyes. "Could it be, you've reached first star?" Cheol only offered a slight smile, which counted as agreement. Mana control training traditionally has 3 stages: body enhancement, reaching the strength realm; altering mana's nature, reaching the chi skill realm; manifesting extraordinary power through mana, reaching the chi burst realm. But his mana art was different. Although it's the same first stage, it can do much more and unlock additional abilities. Thus, Jainwa's mana system is divided into levels called stars. She channeled her energy into Cheol to check, and after seeing the result she happily said, "Perfect. It's indeed first star. Do you feel anything odd when using magic? I thought it would take at least another year." At that, Cheol began to tremble thinking of the hardships he'd endured. "I realized this just learning theory. Looking back, it was truly a kind of insane training. If I failed to control mana, the balance between my heart and the mana channels could collapse completely. But in truth, letting it flow naturally is enough. Mana is like water, it follows its own course. In the end, our body is just a vessel for mana." Cheol's calm words seemed to trigger a realization in Jainwa. She murmured, "The body is a vessel." "Kid. I think I can do it too. It might take time, but I can do it," she said cheerfully. Seeing that, Cheol smiled faintly, happy for his aunt. Has she just had some kind of breakthrough? He wondered. Before Jainwa rushed over, hugged him tightly, and cheerfully said, "Thank you, my little darling. You're my good luck." Then her arms unconsciously tightened, making Chiol's ribs creak. "Hey! Let go! You'll break my ribs," Chiol shouted. Seeing this, Jainwa reluctantly let him go, but excitedly continued, "Wonderful. Then let's move on to second star now. From the start, I knew my knot tin was different from a normal first stage one, right? So what do you think I'm best at using?" Chiol rubbed his chin, thought for a few seconds, then answered, "The thing you're best at using. I think it's the sword." Before he could finish, Jainwa shook her head in disagreement. "I don't think so." That comment startled Chiol, who asked, "But you've never seen me practice swordsmanship, have you?" Jainwa shrugged and replied, "I have. A few times when I had free time. What I mean is, you have a talent even beyond swordsmanship. It's a bit hard to explain in words, but your greatest gift is magic power. Your magical aptitude is so outstanding that everything else fades beside it. I've tried teaching the magic I created to many people, but no one could do it." Looking at things from Chiol's perspective, he began staring at his hands with a skeptical look. "Before I traveled back to the past, I was mocked for not being able to use magic. I don't know about these thoughts inside me." Seeing Chiol brooding like that, Jainwa flicked his forehead and reminded him, "But for you now, reaching Ni Tin shouldn't be difficult. And if you succeed with Ni Tin, the naming ceremony will be child's play. After that, I'll teach you the real techniques. So focus." "Over here," Chiol happily replied, "Yes, understood. By the way, miss, what's that thing next to you?" As he spoke, he glanced at the wooden box sitting on the table. "Oh, that?" Jainwa said softly, and then, suddenly something whizzed past Chiol's face at super speed. It immediately left a scratch across his face and embedded itself deep into the wall behind, causing cracks to appear there as well. Jainwa smiled and answered, "It's an iron marble. You need to learn to release your magic while moving. If you just stand still and use it, that magic is basically useless. Alright, let's get started," she said, her face bright with excitement. But for some reason, our protagonist felt a bit uneasy about this hellish training. Time passed quickly, cutting to some arena. Now, Chiol and Hwa were being trained by Captain Yongquan. "I am Li Yongquan, captain of the Blood Tiger Squad. From now on, I'll instruct you in the techniques of Samwiga. Choose the weapons you'll use and bring them here. You have 1 minute, so don't dawdle." Hearing that, Chiol and Hwa hurried to the weapon racks. But meanwhile, Hwa kept glancing at Chiol for some reason, making him feel a little restless. Finally he couldn't take it and shouted, "Really? What are you staring at? Got something to say?" He barked, causing Hwa to jump and immediately deny, "Staring? What are you talking about?" She then leaned in and whispered to the protagonist, "You're using a sword too, right?" "No," Chiol replied coldly, then quickly grabbed 2 short swords and a spear and returned to the field. This surprised Hwa. "Wait, what? But I saw you learning weapons before." Clearly it was the sword. Over here, Captain Yongquan also looked at the pile of weapons in Chiol's hands and curiously asked, "What are you doing?" Chiol answered, "You told us to choose our weapons and bring them." Yongquan reminded them again, "I told you to choose what you use." Chiol shrugged and replied, "Well, these are the things I use." Hearing that, Captain Yongquan could only fall silent and shake his head in disappointment. "I thought you weren't that stupid, turns out you're an idiot. Etch into your memory the words I'm about to say. I said I'll teach you secret techniques, but not moves or stances. In Samwiga there are countless secret manuals called Nguwai. To master those manuals, you must first awaken the origin that lies sleeping inside your blood vessels. From now on, I'll help you open that sense, so don't worry too much about awakening your instincts." As he spoke, Yongquan flourished the spear in his hand, generating gusts of wind and quickly taking an attack stance. Seeing his fierce posture, Hwa couldn't help but feel scared and said, "What is he about to do?" Chiol had already guessed what would come next, so he warned, "If you don't want to be knocked out right away, get ready." Before the words finished, Yongquan flashed and suddenly appeared in front of Chiol, delivering a powerful formless strike that sent Chiol flying into the air. The only luck was that in that brief moment he managed to use his sword to protect himself. This surprised Yongquan, who laughed heartily. "Ho, you managed to block that." Meanwhile Chio landed lightly, gritted his teeth and thought, "Damn it." This surprised Yongquan, who laughed heartily. "Ho, you managed to block that." Meanwhile Chio landed lightly, gritted his teeth and thought, "Damn it, but this life will be different." Saying that, Chio pushed off with his saws and lunged forward. His stomp cracked the floor, and he charged forward at wind-splitting speed. Time passed, and the training of Chio and Hwa under Captain Yongquan continued. Of course, with his strength, the two of them were beaten mercilessly. A month had passed since I began training with Lee Yongquan. Regardless, this kind of training that breaks bones and damages organs isn't suitable for a 10-year-old. But I don't intend to complain, I'm gradually getting the feel for it, Chio said with a small smile. Nearby, Hwa startled awake. Did I faint again? She asked in confusion. Chio shrugged and replied, Yeah, this is your 20th time, I'm only at 16. The protagonist's teasing tone infuriated Hwa. She snapped, I should have prepared better on day one. From Captain Yongquan's viewpoint, watching the two kids argue, he thought quietly, Miss Bat, this kid has exceptional physicality. I may have pushed him hard, yet he's never been seriously injured. As for that bastard child, from the first day I sensed he was something valuable. At first, seeing him bring a pile of weapons, I thought he was an idiot, but his skill with each weapon is pretty solid, and his practical application exceeded expectations. Moreover, after just 1 month results are already emerging. It's interesting. Thinking that, Yongquan's cold face broke into a faint smile and he decided to beat the kids a bit more. Alright, begin training. Everyone, back to your positions. Hearing that, Chio and Hwa hurriedly stopped arguing, tightened their grips on their weapons, and took on serious expressions. Then Chio realized that fighting normally wouldn't touch Yongquan, so he proposed, Hey, I'll give the signal, try to block it once. Hwa asked curiously, Why should I do that? Chio shrugged and replied, Fine, don't if you don't want to. I just thought I might land a hit on the uncle. Chio's words made Hwa's face change instantly. It seemed she was just as bitter about being beaten by Yongquan for so long. Then she asked cautiously, Are you sure? Chio nodded and answered, I'm sure. Hearing that, Hwa didn't hesitate, she gripped her weapon tight and lunged to intercept, shouting, You owe me one. Behind her, Chio charged in right after Hwa's attack. He thought, with a genius-level opponent I have no chance to win, so I'll have to rely on numbers. Across from them, Yongquan watched the two of them coordinate and didn't spare his praise. Isn't coordinating your attacks the optimal choice? But that's only if the plan succeeds. Saying that, he tilted his head to one side to dodge Chio's spear thrust. Then he swung his spear to counter. However, Chio had already anticipated this and quickly drew his spear back to block. This caused a look of surprise to flash across Yongquan's eyes. Next, he gathered his strength and charged at him. And at the moment both were about to unleash strikes at each other, Chio shouted, Now! Saying that, he jumped back to keep his distance while Hwa darted forward at lightning speed. However, her downward sword strike was easily blocked. From behind, Chio hadn't expected them to hit Yongquan so easily. He tossed his spear aside and quietly transformed his infinite weapon, from the shape of a ring into a long sword. The only thing that could deal real damage was a sword he had obtained from the endless secret stash. Then he began to cloak the sword with his energy and drove force into his soles. He stomped hard and shot forward like an arrow. At that moment, Hwa had already been blown backward by the trainer, but Chio seized the opportunity with perfect timing. Right then, he suddenly let go of the sword in his hand, channeled his power into his fist, and launched a straight punch forward. But nothing is that easy. Chio couldn't help but force a laugh. Ha, you blocked it. His punch was caught cleanly in Captain Yongquan's palm. No sooner had he spoken than Yongquan rewarded him with a punch that sent him flying like a cannonball. He smashed into the wall and couldn't help coughing up some blood. However, the combined attack by the two of them left Yongquan very satisfied. His voice carried a hint of praise, so it took 37 days. Congratulations, you've opened your sixth sense. But the young lady is still far from it. As he spoke, he leaned to one side to evade Hwa's attack, and swept her leg, sending her crashing into the wall. Seeing them both in such a battered state, Yongquan let them off for today and ended the training. That's it for now. As for Hua, she turned to the protagonist and demanded, "Hey, you said you could land a hit, I believed you." That kid, unperturbed by their argument. After turning and walking away, Captain Yunquan quietly looked at his slightly bruised palm and thought, in the end, even after activating magic, it only pierced a little. Even if it's a small amount, I've broken the taboo against using magic. Abandoning such a technique, combined with an excellent combat instinct, would make someone feared by the pillars of the clan. Time passed quickly. On day 47, after Hua opened her sixth sense, training with Captain Yunquan ended. The remaining time was spent resting and reviewing what they had learned, and at that moment, the one who came to see me was my older brother, Li Myong-yong. Li Myong-yong is the eldest son of Li Taixin. His title is Songxiang, a master who is second-ranked in both magic and martial arts. People both admired and feared him, but to me, my big brother was my only brother. Chiol silently reminded himself. Back in the present, after sitting down at the tea table, Myong-yong awkwardly said to his younger brother, "I'm sorry I haven't been able to pay more attention to you. It's just an excuse, but I've been a bit busy lately." Chiol gently replied, knowing his eldest brother had countless things to worry about, "It's okay, I'm fine." Across from him, seeing Chiol's attitude, Myong-yong laughed, "This must be our first meeting today, yet you knew right away who I was?" To that, Chiol answered, "Of course. Even if I'm an illegitimate child, as your brother, how could I not recognize my big brother?" Hearing that, Myong-yong's body trembled for a moment. Then his face grew sad and he warned Chiol, "Illegitimate. Never say that again. Even if our mothers are different, we are still brothers." Saying this, he felt a pang of bitterness for Chiol, the child who hadn't even had a naming ceremony yet and already considered himself illegitimate. Unaware of his brother's inner thoughts, Chiol awkwardly scratched his head, "I'm sorry." Seeing this, Myong-yong could only sigh wearily, "There's no need to apologize, just understand. Next time you don't have to greet me so formally, we're family, what's the point of being so polite?" "Yes, I understand," Chiol said with a bright nod. In his memory, his big brother had always been like this when he was young. Putting greetings aside, Myong-yong gave Chiol a gift, "This is a present for our meeting. When I enrolled at the Eiffel School of Magic in France, I got this, but I think you'll find it more useful." It was a kind of divine elixir called nectar. He said this as he produced a small glass vial from his inner pocket. And for someone who had lived a previous life, Chiol recognized what it was, a high-grade spiritual elixir made by the Tower of Magic in France, 500 milliliters every 10 years. After a moment's thought, he took the small vial and stammered, "Brother, you gave me something so precious, I'm really grateful." Across from him, for some reason Myong-yong seemed a little surprised by Chiol's words. Then he murmured, "You're a bit different, aren't you?" Chiol squinted and asked puzzled, "What do you mean?" Explaining, Myong-yong smiled, "The younger ones I've met before all treated me as a rival, so this feeling is both strange and pleasant." From Chiol's perspective, he clarified his thoughts, "It's not that I don't see you as a rival. Because I was born into this family, you are also my rival. So don't just treat me like a cute kid. Who knows, one day I might become your greatest rival. I hope we'll have an exciting competition." Chiol's confidence made Myong-yong laugh heartily, "Huh, all right then, I'll wait for that day, the day you become my strongest rival." Saying that, he ruffled his younger brother's hair. Chiol told himself, "My eldest brother has always genuinely loved and protected me. This time, I'll definitely protect him." A few days passed quickly. Today was the Li family's second exam, the naming ceremony had arrived. At this time, on a boat, Chiol and Hua were being taken to the exam site. It was called Red Blue Island, a place where the soil's color changed depending on the density of mana in the air. For a very long time, it has been the site of the Li family's naming ceremony. Now, as the ship drew close to the island, a crew member on board spoke up to remind the two of them. "I will now explain the naming exam. Young ladies and young masters must survive on Red Blue Island for 3 weeks and prove themselves. The devices issued to everyone are for location tracking. Unless it's an emergency, you must keep them on you at all times. The final gate of the exam will open 2 days after the end of the 3rd week. Good luck." With that said, Cheol and Hwa quickly strapped the watches onto their wrists. Then the two hoisted backpacks filled with necessities and were left on the deserted island. Afterward, for some reason Hwa suddenly spoke up, "Hey, I have something to say." Before she could finish, Cheol sighed and grumbled, "So you've made up your mind, huh?" "Huh? What?" Hwa shot back. Cheol then blurted out, "You've been meaning to say something since training started." The remark hit the 12-year-old squarely in the face. She flushed and shouted, that, how did you know?" Seeing her flustered, Cheol smirked inwardly, "How could I not know?" Then he asked, "Say it, I'll listen." From Hwa's perspective, the girl looked anxious and swallowed, steeling herself. Then she took the badge off her clothing. She glanced at Cheol and signaled with her eyes for him to do the same. Next, after stashing the two eavesdropping-capable badges away, Cheol casually asked, "All set, what's this about?" At this point, Hwa no longer hid anything. She pulled from her jacket pocket the small glass vial of poison that Mrs. Baek-Hyeon had given her earlier and said plainly, "This is a poison called Dreambine. It only affects children under 15. If exposed to air for more than 5 minutes, it will evaporate. Once absorbed into the body, it will block the mana channels for a long time." Across from her, Cheol's face turned as dark as the bottom of a pot. He asked coldly, "Who gave this to you?" To that question, Hwa of course couldn't reveal her birth mother as the giver. "I'm not going to tell you that." Saying that, she hurled the vial at a nearby rock, shattering it into pieces, and continued, "See? There's no evidence left now. I'll beat you fair and square, without using this poison. So you must give it your all in the match." Her voice was full of determination, which surprised Cheol a bit. But then he replied cheerfully, "I plan to do that anyway." "Good," Hwa nodded in satisfaction. They reattached their badges. Before moving off, Hwa turned back to warn, "Have you reattached the tracker? Don't recklessly go into the island's center until you know the terrain, it's dangerous." From behind, hearing her nagging, Cheol said bored, Okay, I know. Are you worried about me or what?" Up ahead, Cheol's tone immediately angered Hwa. "Worried? I'm just afraid you'll die somewhere before you even face me." Mid-sentence, suddenly guttural roars from some monster erupted from within the forest, cutting their argument short. The two kids exchanged uneasy looks and stared at the forest before them. Then Hwa softly warned, "Then don't die, okay? I'm going ahead." With that, the girl quickly hurried off to one side. Watching her silhouette shrink, Cheol whispered, "She's gone. Even so, my goal isn't the island's outskirts. Alright, time for me to get moving too. Head straight for the center of Red Blue Island." He cracked his knuckles as he spoke, his eyes lighting up with endless excitement for the next journey. At the same time, in the Lee family's observation room, the family's core members and retainers watched Hwa's actions through monitoring screens. Someone commented, "That's the Lee family's 8th child. She's already completed her first hunting task. She took down quite a few monsters. After all, this must be Hwa's first real combat." But that sense didn't come out of nowhere. It took 47 days, didn't it? The crafty old man Cheol-jun said with a chuckle as he stroked his beard. Replying, Captain Young-kwan, leaning against the wall behind them, spoke up, "This child wasn't like that before. I figured it would take at least 2 months." He thought to himself, "She has talent, but that's about it. Someone must have provoked her. That someone is the youngest, Lee Young." Having thought that, he glanced at another screen ahead showing Cheol. Unlike Hwa, who was constantly fighting monsters, Cheol seemed to be exploring the island. This made the old man Cheol-jun curious and ask, "But what exactly is that kid doing?" "Looks like he's finding shelter," Young-kwan voiced his thought. Right after that, a few derisive sounds rang out, acting like a little mouse running away. What a coward. Truly an illegitimate child. Elsewhere, Myung-young was also in the observation room. Hearing them mock his younger brother like that, how could he stay silent? He glanced at the others and warned, "Don't say that. In a dangerous place like this, finding shelter first is wise, there's nothing to mock." His words made a few fools clear their throats awkwardly and respond hollowly, sure, Maybe we've been watching Miss Bat too much, so our standards got raised." On the other side, the crafty old Cheol-jun, unconcerned with Myung-young's status, continued to sneer, "Now then, in the Lee family, ordinary behavior is a crime, isn't it? Someone with Lee blood acting like a commoner is laughable. Hearing the old man's words, Myeong-young's hands clenched in anger. He thought to himself, lowering and mocking a child just because of their origin. Since when did our family become like this? Or perhaps we've always been this way. But still, what on earth is Lee Young planning by heading toward the island's center? Thinking that, he glanced over at Uncle Jae-hong beside him. At that, he was so worried he kept biting his nails. TCH, what the hell is that kid thinking? He muttered something, making Myeong-young feel he wasn't the only one puzzled. What exactly are you planning, Lee Young? Cut to Cheol's location. By now, he'd found a cave to use as shelter. Next, he started burning some herbs, then tossed a burning torch into the cave to check what was inside. After that, he covered the entrance with leaves. His careful actions drew a few approving remarks. His stealth skills aren't bad. Then suddenly the crafty old man Cheol Jun widened his eyes and shouted, "Wait, hold on. What is that kid doing?" From his view, Cheol had taken off the watch and the badge on his chest, and set them aside. Next, he covered the two items with some leaves. The signal was immediately blocked and the screen went black. In the back, Captain Yungkwon couldn't help but laugh heartily. Haha, you really can't predict him. Jae-hong and Myeong-young could only clutch their heads at Cheol's actions. As for Cheol, he had many secrets, so he couldn't let the family members watch him like that. After carefully stashing those two items, he muttered to himself, "No need to let others see this. Now I can use infinity. Once on Red Blue Island, you have to harvest as much as possible. Alright, let's go." As he said it, he transformed the ring on his hand into a short sword. Time quickly passed until evening. At that moment, our protagonist frowned, staring at an earthen pot before him. Inside the pot was a deep blue liquid that looked extremely toxic. Cheol even vaguely saw a face screaming within the liquid. Just looking at its appearance was enough to make one recoil. It's probably done, but it looks awful. Is this really mana tea? No one would think this is an infusion of mana herbs, he told himself. In his past life he couldn't even afford cheap potions, so he used to tag along with herb gatherers and apothecaries to find mana herbs. Red Blue Island is saturated with ambient mana, so you have to take advantage of it to boost your mana. Youngest sister said the same. If you drink an infusion made from mana herbs, it will surely be more effective. Phew, okay. Cheol ground his teeth and slowly lifted the earthen pot toward him. Not long after, he tossed the pot aside, dangling from his hand, and Cheol's face had gone ashen, as if all life had left him. That tastes like it came from hell, he complained. Thus began the solitary 3-week struggle. Time flew by, and today was the 18th day of the naming ceremony. Cut to Lee Myeong-young's office. While he was working, someone suddenly entered the room and said, "Captain, may I come in?" Hearing that, Myeong-young paused his work and replied, "Ah, yes." The visitor, seeing Myeong-young still at work, apologized, "Sorry to bother you." Myeong-young waved it off, It's fine, it's fine." Seems like bad news, huh? To that, the brown-haired man nodded gravely and explained, "A large group of migrants appears to have entered the northern region of Han. I thought they'd pass through the uncharted lands, but they headed straight south. 2 days' march from them is the Lee family's mana quarry." The speaker was Yu Gunsong, deputy captain of the Blue Heaven Sword Unit under Lee Myeong-young. At this news, Myeong-young stroked his chin. He thought of other reports he'd received recently. Migrants? They usually choose uncharted lands to pass through, committing countless crimes as they move. He muttered in speculation, "Those jackals wouldn't invade our territory without an agenda." Gunsong fully agreed and added, "They may look like migrants, but that could be a cover. It's possible another force is pulling the strings behind this." Myeong-young began tapping his fingers on the desk and added, "Previously we had intelligence that Nine Dragon City was mobilizing forces toward the northern border. Speaking of Nine Dragon City, it's a giant power from Central Plains. We share a border with the uncharted lands. They've provoked the Lee family multiple times by encroaching on our territory. Perhaps word of our father's absence leaked out. This is the perfect opportunity for enemies to strike." Thinking that, Myeong-young looked up and asked, "Does our intelligence branch have confirmation on this?" Gunsong answered with a shake of his head, "I knew even before them, since you told me to keep an eye on things. Hearing that, Myung-young rose from his chair and said tiredly, then coordinate with the Intelligence Investigation Unit and look into it further. I have a feeling this isn't simple. I hope it's just a bad hunch. He said this while watching out the window. Still, the sense of unease hadn't faded at all. Cut to somewhere inside Red Blue Island. At that moment, a red magic circle suddenly appeared on the ground. Next, the magic circle flared brightly and produced a floating spatial rift in the air. From inside that rift, the silhouette of someone stepped out. He wore white robes and carried a monk's staff. The stranger muttered mockingly, 2 nights is more than enough to kill an illegitimate brat. It seems his target is Cheol. Time quickly passed to the next morning, somewhere up on the island. A huge dragon with glowing red eyes was roaring, threatening something ahead. This was a rank 7 dragon monster, Draco. Opposite it stood none other than our protagonist. He gripped his sword, panting from exhaustion, as if he'd been fighting the massive lizard for some time. Then, as if wanting to finish the fight quickly, the dragon suddenly opened its mouth and drew a deep breath. Its throat ballooned, and an orange glow could be seen from outside. 1 second later it opened wide and unleashed a massive column of flame that shot forward at wind-ripping speed. Cheol felt an overwhelming heat blast straight at his face. His eyes went wide, and he twisted his body to the side, barely dodging in the nick of time. Immediately, without hesitation, Cheol charged at the dragon. While it stood ready to spew fire, he lunged forward, channeling mana into his sword and executing a move called Demon Slash. Cheol used the falling force from above, driving his blade deep into the center of the dragon's head. From his strike, bolts of lightning began to release, causing its head to char. Finally, the massive beast let out a woeful cry and immediately perished, reincarnating anew. After sensing the monster was completely lifeless, Cheol exhaled a light sigh and acknowledged its danger. Phew, dragons are something else. It's on a completely different level from the other monsters. If I'd fought it right after arriving here, I probably would have been killed by the first blow. Since entering Red Blue Island, it took me 19 days to reach the dragon's territory. But staying longer would be a waste of time. There's another reason I had to come all the way here. He thought this as he sheathed his sword. Before he could do anything else, a distant noisy sound caught his attention. Unable to restrain his curiosity, Cheol carefully and stealthily crept toward the source of the sound. From his view, the things making those strange noises were a group of weapon-wielding lizard men. They were rank 8 monsters. The fact that these green skins had gathered here and were screaming like they were insane made Cheol doubt to himself, something abnormal has been happening since yesterday. Normally, lizard men only appear at the island's edge, but now they're moving into the center, attacking and then fleeing. These creatures aren't smart and are low-ranked. Could they be influenced by something from outside? If so, I need to check it out. With that thought, he drew his sword from its sheath and dashed out of the bushes, heading straight toward the group of lizard men. The moment they saw his figure, they let out a terrified cry and fled in haste. The monsters had no intention of fighting at all. This confirmed Cheol's suspicion, just as I thought. Once could be a coincidence, but if it happens twice something's wrong. I'd better follow them. He swung his sword quickly, severing the heads of those monsters. Then silently mused, strange phenomena are occurring on the island, just like I suspected. As for the mage who infiltrated the island the day before, he now emanated a purple mana aura and kept murmuring as if in a trance, armor, martialists, combat, all, form the array. How could a kid that small single-handedly fight so many monsters? The descendant of the Lee clan really is different. But it's nothing to worry about. After all, he's just a child, someone who will surely fall into this obvious trap. I don't think we'll need plan B, the young mage said as he stroked an egg in his hand. He was the Beastmaster Nishiyama Shogo. As he predicted, Cheol had followed the lizard men here for exactly his purpose. Perched in a nearby bush, Cheol had become aware of his situation. He was a bit suspicious because it was too obvious, but it turned out to be a real trap. Monster control, he's a Beastmaster. But how could an outsider sneak all the way in here? Cheol wondered to himself. Very quickly he came up with an answer. Wait, it's not impossible. If a teleportation array had been set up inside, it could happen. Then the one behind this must be a member of the Lee clan. Should I report this to the clan and wait for the troops? No. If I wait until they arrive it'll be too late. By then I won't be able to find who's behind this anymore. So there's only one option, I'll hide myself with stealth magic and finish him myself. With that thought, Chio ripped the badge from his chest and tucked it into his inner pocket. Next he used true stealth, enveloping himself in a blue energy that concealed his breath and presence. Immediately after, Chio leaped down from the tree trunk and shot toward Nishiyama at top speed. Without hesitation, he swung his sword, aiming straight for the back of his neck. But things never came easy for Chio. At that moment, the egg in Nishiyama's hand suddenly let out an alarm sound. It turned out not to be an egg but some kind of bird curled up to look like one. Its piercing cry startled Nishiyama into turning around. He shouted, "Since when?" Behind him, Chio silently cursed, "Damn, does he have a talisman that senses danger?" Thinking this, Chio increased the speed of his attack further. Unfortunately, Nishiyama reacted in time. He immediately swung his staff backward and shoved Chio's body away, leaving a long skid mark on the ground. Then both paused for a beat. Nishiyama praised, "You bastard of the Lee clan, you're better than I thought." To that praise, Chio retorted sarcastically, "Maybe you're just too weak." The mockery from a child drove Nishiyama into a rage. He refocused on eliminating his target and immediately ordered the surrounding lizard men, "Shut up. Attack it." Obeying their master's command, the dull lizard men rushed forward without fear of death to try to draw some blood from him. Seeing this, Chio began channeling his mana into his sword. He used his heavenly cleaver technique, rushing forward. His sword swung through the air like a ribbon and neatly lopped off the heads of 3 lizard men before they even realized. However, this did not faze the mage. From the start, he'd used the lizard men to hold Chio back briefly, creating an opening to cast his magic. At that moment, a magic circle suddenly appeared beneath Chio's feet. From inside it, countless blazing red chains shot out, wrapping tightly around his body and sword. Chio's face went blank as he said, "My body won't move." In front, Nishiyama laughed loudly, as if tasting victory, "Haha, you've fallen into my trap. This is a high-level formation that can seal a martialist's mana vortex. Without mana, you're nothing but a weak, useless kid. Die helplessly." He laughed, not realizing those words were the dumbest he'd spoken all day. They accidentally gave Chio a hint on how to handle the situation. "Seal my power, huh? Then I'll just use my mana channels instead," Chio muttered as he began distributing mana throughout his body along his meridians. Gradually his body moved forward. With the pressure Chio applied, the chains could no longer hold him. They began to creak, sounding like they might snap at any moment. Then, with a springing leap forward, Chio shattered his restraints and lunged straight at Nishiyama, cutting off the escape route ahead of him. In Nishiyama's terrified eyes, Chio leveled his sword at his face and asked coldly, "Aren't you going to run?" Nishiyama panicked slightly, taking a few steps back and asking, "How did you get free?" Facing Chio, he of course had no obligation to answer, so he only shook his head, "I have no duty to tell you. I've reported this to the clan. So surrender now." From Nishiyama's perspective, whether he still had an ace up his sleeve or not, he confidently said, "Haha, no problem. I'll kill you and reclaim my freedom." Chio found the mage's wild words truly baffling. "What? What the hell are you talking about?" Before the sentence finished, a huge shadow suddenly hurtled toward Chio, sending his small body flying like a cannonball into a nearby tree. The impact was so strong it made a deafening crack in the air, and Chio spat a mouthful of blood. After being struck, Chio's mind formed a fleeting impression. He shakily lifted his head to look around, and saw that what had just hit him was a giant green turtle with a long beard. It was the guardian of Red Blue Island, Mountain Turtle Head, a rank 3 monster. Truly an overwhelmingly powerful creature. Could an ordinary beastmaster like him have tamed that? Chio thought, turning a skeptical look toward Nishiyama. From that expression alone, Nishiyama could read Chio's thoughts and admitted, "Seems you catch on quickly. Although I haven't fully controlled it, if it coldly kills you on its own it will still obey. So you'd best give up fighting." Saying that, he pulled several talismans from inside his sleeve and tossed them into the air. Then his form dissolved into a purple smoke, avoiding the risk of the giant turtle accidentally trampling him into a pulp while it fought Chio. Back in Chio's view, merely sensing the terrifying presence radiating from the giant turtle made the hair on his body stand on end. Cheol reminded himself, stay calm. If he hasn't fully controlled it yet, I'll just capture the Beastmaster first. To do anything to the mountain turtle head, this is the only way. I prepared this just in case, but I didn't think I'd have to use it like this. A banned drug because its side effects are too severe, though its benefits are great, a mana enhancement pill. Saying that, he took out a brown pill and tossed it straight into his mouth. The moment he swallowed it, it emitted energy that flowed through his body, making him feel overflowing with power. However, this was still not all that Cheol needed to prepare. One more thing, the technique youngest Manhwa told me to use only in the most dangerous situations. Now is that time. With that thought, Cheol's body began to emit a tremendous surge of energy. The force he radiated pushed away the surrounding earth and rocks. He prepared to use the heaven-defying technique. Next, since the pill's effect was limited in time, Cheol wasted no seconds and darted forward like a lightning bolt. Immediately, he swung his sword at the giant turtle. His swing formed a blade of light that cut straight toward its neck. However, it was barely a scratch to the turtle. Its despair-inducing defense made it extremely difficult for Cheol. I haven't even touched it yet. But did it stop? Fine, I'll finish it with this move. With that thought, he began concentrating energy into his sword to unleash another technique. However, the giant turtle in front wasn't stupid. It had no intention of standing still for Cheol's strike. It opened its mouth and released a purple shockwave that spread outward. The moment the wave hit, Cheol felt a heavy oppressive weight bear down on him. He thought, this roar is a fear skill. This mana vibration prevents me from moving. Damn it. Then, while Cheol still didn't know how to counter this skill, a familiar black smoke began to spread from his chest, immediately lifting the pressure crushing his body. This surprised Cheol a little. The dark energy in my body resisted the mountain turtle head skill. Now's the chance. Saying that, Cheol gathered force in his feet and sprang forward hard, and used the demon cleaver technique he learned from the nameless warrior in the memories of the endless azure weapon. The attack struck precisely at its throat, causing the turtle's head to tilt up toward the sky. From its mouth a column of deep purple light began to blast out, sending shivers down the spine. So much so that part of a cloud high above was scattered by the beam. Back to Cheol, right after releasing that move he felt excruciating pain throughout his body. He collapsed to his knees and kept vomiting blood. Damn, I don't have much time left. The side effects of the mana enhancement and the heaven-defying technique will paralyze me for a while. Within 10 seconds I have to find that Beastmaster. Thinking this, with no time to lose, Cheol dashed forward, using all his senses to search where Nishiyama had run. And it seemed even fate wanted to help Cheol. At that moment, he suddenly noticed a red energy thread on the ground. He hurriedly followed it, and sure enough, the thread led straight to the mage Nishiyama's location. Ahead, Nishiyama saw Cheol charging at him with murderous intent and turned pale. What? How is this possible? He whispered, and scrambled backward. However, at that moment Cheol's sword was already right at him. Cheol thought, the distance isn't enough yet, almost there. If I were a little stronger, I could just extend the sword. Cheol shouted and began using the endless transformation power to lengthen his blade. Immediately after, he swung his sword in a flash, slashing straight into the chest of the mage Nishiyama and sending him to the underworld at once. Right after that, Cheol was so exhausted he could no longer hold his sword. I need to take care of myself first. If I pass out now, it's over for me. Youngest Manhwa warned me to take this if I used that move. Luckily I brought the nectar. Now, before any monsters come snooping around, I have to deal with this guy first. Thinking that, Cheol hurriedly swallowed the prepared pill. Immediately after, his body went limp and he collapsed to the side. Some unknown time passed, and when he opened his eyes again, Cheol suddenly found himself lying in a blindingly white space. Black wisps of smoke kept spreading across his body. Cheol wondered, everything's white, where am I? What happened to the Beastmaster and the mountain turtle head? As he thought this and tried to sit up, a sharp pain struck him. It contorted his face. His whole body trembled continuously, as if about to shatter. Cheol silently thought to himself, unaware that in this white space a giant eye above was staring down at him. A strange voice began to speak, whether Cheol heard it or not, so this is how it turned out. Those things are too dangerous for humans to assimilate. And now the two exist together in one being. I hoped you wouldn't wake. If only now. The voice fell silent briefly, then spoke again, feed it. Right after the command, something suddenly dropped straight in front of Cheol, and he looked on curiously. In his head an association formed when he saw its shape. It's a purple honeycomb. Could that be the violet hematite? The strange voice continued, not for you, it's this that must eat it. The era has shifted. Grow strong, child of humanity, don't let yourself be swallowed by the times. Back in Cheol's hazy vision, he seemed to see the giant turtle speak to him. Then it turned and slowly walked away. His sight gradually went dark. Returning to reality sometime later, Cheol opened his eyes once more. The first thing he saw was the figure of little Wa. Seeing him awake, the girl poked her head in and asked, "Oh, you're awake." Seeing that, Cheol gave her a tired look and asked cautiously, "Is that Wa?" His empty remark made the girl furious. How dare this brat call you by your name? Since you're hurt, I'll let it slide. How's your body feeling? At the reminder, Cheol hurriedly closed his eyes, focused on checking his condition, and thought, although the musculoskeletal system is severely damaged, the amount of mana has surged tremendously. Could it be that I actually absorbed the Violet River Stone Elixir? Thinking that, Cheol hid his surprise and only listed the injuries he had sustained. Some mana channels were severed, the organs were slightly displaced, the bones were loosened, and some muscles were torn. It's not that serious. Cheol's voice was very calm, while Wa rolled her eyes when she heard it. Her face turned purple as she shouted, "What? That's not serious. Have you been hit in the head?" Back to Cheol's perspective, he felt a bit guilty as he looked at Wa. The Violet River Stone Elixir was what Li Wa intended to take. It's a terrifying spiritual medicine that strengthens the body, boosts mana, and grants immunity to poison and curses. It was indeed what I decided to take on Red Green Island, but I do feel a little guilty. With that thought, Cheol suddenly sprang up as if nothing had happened and asked, "Wait, why are you here?" While Wa was about to answer, a voice called from afar, "Little brother." The voice came from his elder brother Myung-Young, who had just run up. Myung-Young quickly produced some kind of healing potion and hurriedly said to Cheol, "Are you okay? First, let me heal you with mana. I also brought medicinal water." Seeing his hurried demeanor, Cheol managed a strained smile and waved him off. "No need for mana healing, but I'll take the medicinal water." Saying that, he took the healing bottle and drank without stopping. From Myung-Young's point of view, seeing his younger brother so badly injured made his chest tighten with pain. After a few seconds of thought, he glanced at Wa and quietly said, "Wa, could you step outside for a moment?" Hearing this, Wa understood they wanted to speak privately, so she didn't stay to interfere. She nodded, "Yes, I understand." After Wa left, Myung-Young lowered his voice and said, "If you die, I'll wipe every organization connected to the beast tamers off this world, no matter how powerful they are. As a member of the Li family, what you've shown is the model of a martial practitioner. But as your elder brother, I can't view it positively, it's recklessness." His tone was full of reproach, but not without concern. This moved Cheol a little. His face flushed as he scratched his head and said, "I didn't expect the mountain turtle head to appear. Sorry, brother. If I'd known it was there, I would have waited." Seeing his apologetic demeanor, Myung-Young couldn't help but sigh. It's good that you can tell the difference between recklessness and confidence. Putting that aside, Cheol spoke up, "Brother, since I dealt with the beast tamer, the information about him belongs to me." As he spoke, Cheol reached his hand forward. And this action of his made Myung-Young wince. "I knew you'd say that." That beast tamer used to be a standard 5th-rank sorcerer of the Inyang Agency in Japan. It seems he was expelled for attempting to learn forbidden arts. Someone behind provided high-grade talismans and magical items, then activated them while the mountain turtle head slept. They wanted to make it appear as if the monster acted on its own. Turning back to Cheol, upon hearing this he frowned in thought and asked, "So you still haven't found the mastermind?" In response, Myung-Young shook his head. "He's in a near-death state, so it's hard to extract information immediately." Suddenly an idea flashed through Cheol's mind, and he hurriedly said, so this wasn't their main target against you. They wanted to damage your reputation by making people believe you failed to detect the intruder and reacted too slowly. Cheol's explanation seemed to wake Myung-young up. That's exactly it. Looks like we can't just pretend we don't know. Myung-young sighed, and Cheol, a bit worried for his elder brother, asked, "Are you alright?" In response to Cheol's concern, Myung-young ruffled his hair and reassured him, "I'm fine. My reputation took a bit of damage, but it's nothing significant. I can't be absent for long, so I'll return right away." With that said, just as Myung-young was about to leave, Cheol suddenly reached out, grabbed his hand, and said with a serious face, "Big brother, do you want to make a deal with me? Say that you anticipated the beast tamer's intrusion and ordered me to take care of it first so I can testify that way. That would make it look like you had prepared even for things the family's intelligence hadn't detected." Hearing this, Myung-young quickly guessed Cheol's true motive and asked back, "You'd prefer to tell the truth, right?" Cheol stood and replied, "If people believe I did it on my own, they'll be more wary and cautious of me. So that's why you call it a deal." "Right, a deal is when both sides exchange something they each need. So what do you want?" Myung-young asked, and Cheol bluntly stated his request, "Give me access to the archive vault, 3 days will be enough." As he said it, he reached forward, and Myung-young grasped his hand, teasing, "Arrogant brat, fine. Thanks." His voice was full of gratitude. However, Cheol shook his head slightly, "No need to thank me. It's just a deal." Turning to Myung-young, he gently patted Cheol's shoulder a few times and whispered, "Even if I hadn't agreed, you'd have had a way to handle this, right?" At the same time, Myung-young's phone started ringing non-stop to remind him. It seemed the Azure Sword Squad was calling him. Now he really had to go. Saying that, as if remembering something, Myung-young tossed the short sword infinity back to Cheol and winked, "I'll keep this a secret for you." With that, he hurried off. Cheol watched his brother's retreating figure and let out a few excited laughs. He really is no easy opponent. After Myung-young left, Hwa returned and asked, "Looks like the talk went well. Which trial chamber will you challenge?" 3 weeks have passed, it should be open by now, she asked curiously. However, Cheol didn't answer. He even turned the question back, "What about you? Which one will you try?" "Hey, I'm asking first." Hwa snapped, while Cheol shrugged and said, "If you want to know, answer mine first." Facing Hwa, with no other choice, she proudly shared her plan, "Which trial will I attempt? Nothing less than the hardest, the crucial authority trial." "What about you?" Cheol replied that he would challenge the combat arena trial. This left Hwa stunned. Such a place exists. Don't tell me that's one of the peripheral trials. Cheol nodded calmly, "Yeah, it's indeed in the outskirts." Hearing that, for some reason Hwa's face suddenly showed disappointment. Then she sneered, "How disappointing. Looks like I misjudged you. You chose a peripheral trial, so there's nothing more to say. I thought you were a rival, frankly, I thought you were better than me." With that, Hwa began to walk away, disappointed. Cheol watched her leave and wasn't surprised at all. He thought to himself, since everyone assumes the location determines a trial's difficulty, they probably think I picked the outskirts because it's easier. Let them think whatever they want. Time passed quickly, it was starting to get light, and Cheol was still wandering in the forest searching for something. "I don't remember exactly, but it should be around here. Before the reset, this was the cave I happened to discover. And it's also where I'll complete the second naming ceremony trial, the combat arena." Thinking that, he brushed aside the plants in front of him. And now, before him was a cave as black as ink. Next, the protagonist prepared a torch and carefully stepped inside. As he walked, he thought, at first glance it's just an ordinary wall, but of course it won't be that simple. With that in mind, he drew his sword and began slashing repeatedly at the wall before him. Chunks of debris started falling away, revealing behind them a massive iron door standing upright. Seeing this, a hint of joy appeared in Cheol's eyes. Found it. Then Cheol drew the short sword across his palm, letting blood well up, and flung the drops at the door. The blood, containing mana, clung to the iron and emitted a blinding light like a switch activating the door. The door shuddered once, then slowly slid open to reveal a vast hall with a sword plunged deep into a wooden stand. The familiar scene stirred memories and he stepped briskly inside. He approached the wooden table, dropped blood into the concave basin carved into it, and murmured, "Descendant of the Lee clan requests the ancestral trial, please grant permission." As his words echoed, a blue light like smoke rose from the basin. The combat arena's challenge had only one rule, to defeat oneself. From Cheol's perspective, the blue light resolved into a figure identical to him. He was so familiar with this trial that he wasn't surprised. The trial offers unlimited attempts, and until you win you cannot leave, even if you give up. Then, let's begin. He thought as he slowly drew his sword. But before he could launch an attack, a blade of light sliced across his neck, and the protagonist's small head instantly separated from his body. "What the hell is happening?" Cheol blurted, stunned. The last thing he saw was his doppelganger standing right beside him. After who knows how long, the protagonist calmed down. He hurriedly touched his neck and swallowed hard a few times. Sweat streamed down his young face. He thought, my head was definitely just severed, right, the illusions in this combat arena can't actually kill me, but the realism is infuriating. At this level, an ordinary person would probably go insane. Besides, can I really reach that level? The arena's illusion lets me use power perfectly, which means I still haven't tapped my full potential. If I could fully exploit it, I would have blocked that strike just now, Cheol reminded himself. He tightened his grip on the sword, determination flashing in his eyes. But as time passed, on the third occasion Cheol was stabbed through the belly by his fake self and died. On the fifth attempt, he managed to block the blade but was immediately killed by having his neck broken. By the 10th time, the result was still his head torn from his neck. And so it went, 13th time, 18th, 23rd. Cheol lost count of how many times he'd died in the trial. How many more is this? He wondered. In the silent space, the two identical forms clashed again and again with almost identical swordplay. A piercing sound rang out as their blades met. After being pushed back, Cheol gasped, thinking, is this the 75th time? Or the 80th? But now I understand a little. The greatest strength I have is freedom, a crushing versatility, an unpredictable fighting style. This time I'll definitely do it. With that thought in his head, Cheol began changing his longsword into an axe and charged to attack again. Thus, the two figures once more launched into a flurry of close blows. As they fought, they kept switching weapons constantly. From the perspective of the fake Cheol, after the two axes clashed, he leaped backward to create distance. Then the fake Cheol swapped his weapon from axe to longsword, and lunged forward to strike once more. The sword in his hand easily pierced through Cheol's belly. Yet this was exactly what the protagonist wanted. At that moment, Cheol reached out and gripped the fake Cheol's wrist, preventing him from withdrawing the sword from his body. "Idiot, I deliberately left an opening," he said, and immediately used the technique demonic cleave, slicing the fake Cheol in two in an instant. His strike was so powerful it churned up the ground behind them. The fake Cheol's body slowly began to dissipate. At the same time, his face formed a smile, one that looked deeply satisfied with Cheol's performance. From Cheol's viewpoint, he watched the fake Cheol's body dissolve into a stream of blue light and thought, if I pass the combat arena trial, the Lee bloodline will release its hidden power. In my previous life my ability was the most common type, enhancement. But in this life, what will it be? At that moment, blue energy sources began to hover in the air before Cheol's eyes. Moments later they flowed into his body, awakening the dormant power in his bloodline. Immediately, a golden aura enveloped him. This power is, Cheol murmured. Meanwhile, outside the great iron door, the clan's core members stood waiting. They whispered among themselves, while Uncle Jae-hong sighed wearily. Ha! I thought this time he'd behave. That annoying brat. The more peaceful the naming ceremony, the more trouble he causes. No sooner had he finished speaking than someone in the group shouted, the mana density is changing. It's opening. Hearing that, Jae-hong hastily turned his gaze to the door. Sure enough, the door flung wide open, and Cheol's figure staggered out. His steps began to wobble wildly, and he collapsed forward. Thankfully Jae-hong reacted quickly, rushing forward to catch him and anxiously asked, Lee Young, are you all right? Wake up. In response to his uncle's concern, Cheol looked up with a hollow face as if he hadn't eaten for half a month. His stomach kept growling for food. "I'm so hungry, water," he managed to mutter a few words, before his eyes rolled back and he fainted. Jae-hong trembled with anger at the sight. "That brat!" his uncle shouted. Time passed quickly, and the scene shifted to Cheol's villa. By now the protagonist had returned home. The maid Gawa burst into tears with joy when she saw him unharmed. "Young master, do you know how worried I was? First the beast tamer, then the guardian mountain, then the ancient trials set by the ancestors." She cried as she clutched Cheol. Seeing that, Cheol could only force a smile. "Nurse, I'm filthy. I've been outside almost a month." Ignoring his words, Gawa still wouldn't let go and inspected him closely to make sure he had no injuries before nodding. "I was going to give you a good scolding, but, never mind. Welcome home, young master. I've prepared a bath. After you wash, I'll get your meal ready." Cheol nodded, but then remembered his youngest sister Jianghua and asked, "Nurse, what about my sister? I thought she'd be the first to run over." At that, Gawa's footsteps suddenly stopped. Her voice faltered, unsure how to explain. This made Cheol curious. He wondered what had happened while he was away. Time passed quickly, scene shifting to some house. At that moment, Jianghua was cheerfully greeting her nephew through the iron gate. "Hee, my dear nephew has arrived." Seeing her jaunty posture despite being confined, Cheol could only rub his face in pain and ask, "What did you do?" In front of him, Jianghua didn't explain and instead smiled as she asked, "Sorry, but it's good to see you're safe. But, what did you do to make your mana spike like that? You still can't fully process the energy inside your body. Sit down. Now I'll..." Before she could finish, Cheol's expression turned serious, but Jianghua just scratched her head and laughed it off. "Huh, it's fine, it's fine." From Jianghua's perspective, she felt moved to see Cheol so worried about her. She hadn't expected him to go this far for her. The reason she was locked up was that she had caused an uproar in the control room with the elders and the big brother. She poked her fingertips together and stammered, "I'm sorry, dear. I thought they were doing something strange to you, so I couldn't hold back and lost my temper." She said she had been furious at the thought that she might never see him again. As she spoke, her throat seemed to choke up. She began to mime strangling herself to illustrate her point. Cheol himself was surprised. To be honest, he hadn't fully trusted his youngest sister before, but somehow he had come to see her as part of the family. Now he had accepted that. Thinking this eased Cheol's heart. He assured his little sister aloud, "I'll get you out soon, please wait a little longer." Hearing that, Jianghua in the cell hurriedly said, "Huh? How can you do that? Don't push yourself." Cheol shook his head and explained, "I won't do anything reckless, you'll be released soon anyway. See you next time." With that, he quickly left the cell. Time passed quickly, scene shifting to an airport. By then, all the core members of the Li clan had already gathered and were waiting. All because the person disembarking from this plane was the current head of the clan, Li Taixin. Seeing him appear, Madame Baekhuan hurriedly asked, "Has he arrived?" Taixin replied with a nod, "Sorry to keep everyone waiting." Madame Baekhuan bowed and said respectfully, "It's all right. The hot springs are ready, please bathe and then join us for the meal." Among the group, Cheol and Little Hua were also present. He subtly glanced at his father and quietly thought, "After the naming ceremony events, I thought I'd matured quite a bit. But the distance between my father and me, how far is it really? I still can't measure it." As he thought this, Taixin noticed his gaze. For a moment their eyes met. However, Taixin soon turned away and muttered, "I've always said those who don't know how to fight are unnecessary to the clan, but among them, there's only one child who carries in him the desire to defeat me." His offhand remark startled those around him, who began to whisper, "Who is he talking to? Big brother?" Cheol naturally understood the comment was directed at him. The sharpness from his old man made him sigh heavily. Had he restrained himself this much and Dad still saw through it? He wondered. Time passed quickly, scene shifting to the Li clan's great banquet hall. To celebrate Taishin's return from a long journey, of course there had to be a number of parties like this. For Cheol, as an illegitimate child, even if he attended he would just stand quietly in a corner, observing everyone around him. Because this was a rare event in the Lee clan, the scale of this banquet was far grander than other naming ceremonies. That person is the youngest known Mage Tower Master. And this one is the director of the Yin-Yang Institute, no, actually currently the deputy director. Cheol thought to himself quietly. Many familiar faces he'd seen in the papers appeared at the naming ceremony. But before he could dwell on it, Steward Choi approached and reminded him, "Pardon the intrusion, young master, the clan head requests your presence." Hearing that, Cheol frowned and asked, "Father is calling for me?" Steward Choi nodded and guided him, "Yes, this way please." At that, Cheol hurried to follow him. As they walked, he couldn't help but wonder why Tae-shin wanted to see him. "Father summoned me privately, what could it be? I hope it's not something serious." Soon after, he was led to the meeting place. Tae-shin saw his son's back. Cheol bowed quickly and said, "Father, did you call me for something?" Having said that, when he looked up he was a little surprised to see that at this moment, his eldest brother Myung-jung was also present. His brother's appearance made the protagonist suspect. Could this be related to the incident where the mage Nishiyama managed to infiltrate Red Azure Isle? Opposite him, Tae-shin didn't let him wonder for long and said, "I think you know why I summoned you. I want to hear about what happened at the naming ceremony. According to Myung-jung, you discovered the outsider and captured him. This was your plan, wasn't it?" To Cheol, Tae-shin's words carried pressure, making his face sweat. "Just as I thought. So father already knows." Cheol thought to himself, then nodded and answered, "Yes, that's right. I was the one who proposed the deal with Big Brother. The condition was that I be allowed access to the archive for 3 days and help him avoid this wave of public scrutiny." In response, Tae-shin spoke sternly, "Considering your contributions this time, I will overlook your false report. But there won't be a next time." "Yes, I understand." The protagonist bowed his head and said. Then Tae-shin glanced at his firstborn and warned, "Myung-jung, you will receive an appropriate punishment later. This banquet was your responsibility. Return to your duties." Hearing this, Myung-jung held no grudge and accepted, "Yes, I will do so." Having said that, he gave Cheol a smile and briskly left. While Cheol wondered whether his eldest brother would be all right after being punished by their father, he set that aside for the moment. After everyone departed, Tae-shin continued to speak to Cheol, "Forget the false report for now. This merit belongs to you. You will receive the reward Myung-jung promised. Finally, because you uncovered the trial within the match, I will grant you a reward." At this, Cheol's eyes flashed with surprise. Then he voiced his request, a request the author had deliberately concealed. Time passed quickly. The naming ceremony reached its main phase as Tae-shin moved to the most important part of today's ritual. He addressed everyone, "Thank you to all the guests who came. May our 2 children, the protagonists of today's banquet, be blessed on the path ahead. Now, we will continue the naming rite. Wa, step forward. You have been chosen by the holy sword and shine like the sun around you. Keep walking this brilliant path always." He gave her the name Seo-hyun, meaning, forever radiant. As soon as his words rang out, a scroll suddenly unfurled before Seo-hyun, the new name written inside. This made the girl very happy. Her eyes lit up and she quickly replied, "Thank you." Then Tae-shin turned his gaze to Cheol. "Next, Yang, step forward." When he was called up, the atmosphere at the banquet seemed to fall silent. Everyone was quiet, saying nothing, very different from the way they treated Seo-hyun a moment ago. Cheol wasn't too surprised by this. Their reaction wasn't any different from the previous selection ceremony. But it's fine, he reminded himself. Meanwhile, Tae-shin's voice continued, "You are hard and sharp, yet also flexible and unbroken. Like a blacksmith gathering steel from all directions to forge into a single mass, you have also forged yourself. I cannot find a better word to describe you, so I will give you the name Cheol." He snapped his fingers for emphasis. Immediately after, the scroll bearing the name Cheol was displayed before him. Seeing the name, a thought sprang to Cheol's mind, "I was once named to mean live resilient like iron and steel, but now that meaning has changed. Until I reach the top of the Lee clan, I will not stop. My name is Lee Cheol." With that thought, he exclaimed enthusiastically, "Thank you." Time passed to the next day. the scene shifted to the Lee clan's detention room. By then, Jianhua inside the cell had nearly gone mad. She tore at her hair, gripped the bars with both hands, and screamed like a wild animal wanting out. It's suffocating. I'm so frustrated. I didn't even get to witness the naming. They said they'd release me, why is it taking so long? Outside, the two guards listened, their faces paling from the headache her ranting caused. Her non-stop swearing made them suffer. At that moment, a phone call came through. While Jianhua sat biting her sleeve in frustration, one of the guards entered, opened the door, and said, "You can go out now. Discipline will be addressed later." For now, she was allowed to leave the quarantine area. Hearing this, Jianhua's face blossomed. To celebrate being released, she gleefully kicked the door open, prompting the guard behind her to snap, "Hey! Don't go kicking stuff." Before she'd taken a few steps, a familiar voice called out, "Wait. Hold on." Hearing this, Jianhua hurried back toward the voice and saw her nephew Chiol leaning against the wall. "Oh, kiddo. Did you really get me released?" Jianhua said in astonishment. Chiol nodded in confirmation, "Yes, that's right." This made Jianhua jump. She asked dazedly, "Huh? How?" Before she could finish, Chiol took out a piece of paper and tossed it to her. "Huh? What's this?" Jianhua asked, but Chiol offered little explanation, saying only enigmatically, "You owe me a favor." Jianhua widened her eyes and read the paper. It declared, "Li Jianhua is granted the elder title and appointed as the master of 9th young master Li Chiol." Reading it, her eyes bulged like a cow's. She couldn't believe what she'd just read. Only Chiol remained cheerful. "From now on, please teach me, master," he said, enthusiastically reaching his hand forward. Time passed quickly. Now Chiol wore a blue martial outfit, while his maid Gawa beside him sniffled and murmured, "It starts today, right?" Chiol nodded, "Yes. This is just the beginning." "So the young master is already 13. She murmured. Meanwhile, after finishing packing his things, Chiol nodded and said, "Then I'll be off." It had been 3 years since the naming ceremony, and today his life as a freshman officially began. Cut to the clan's dojo. When children reach the right age they get shoved in here for training. Chiol's presence made them curious, and they started whispering to one another, "Isn't that the illegitimate kid?" "Yeah. That's the 9th child, Li Chiol. I heard he caused chaos at the selection and naming ceremonies. Must have just been luck. After all, he's an illegitimate child. It's hard to believe he earned that result at the naming fair purely by skill, right?" Curiosity buzzed non-stop, which irritated Chiol. "Illegitimate, illegitimate, my head's killing me," he complained, before other voices drew attention. "Oh. It's the 8th young lady. That's the lineal descendant for you. The presence is totally different." Observing everyone's reaction to Seo Hyun, Chiol could only smile. "Their response is so different from mine," he silently watched Seo Hyun. When Seo Hyun noticed his gaze, her body suddenly froze. She mechanically walked up to Chiol and said, "Ah, hello." Chiol answered with a nod, "Yeah, long time no see." Then Seo Hyun scratched her cheek awkwardly and stammered, You don't hold a grudge about what happened at the naming ceremony, do you?" "About how I said I was disappointed." Her words brought back a memory of red azure for Chiol. Of course he didn't take it personally. If Seo Hyun hadn't mentioned it, he'd have long forgotten. "It's fine, I don't mind," Chiol said with a sigh, which made Seo Hyun brighten. "Really? Really? Great. You can be a little petty, huh?" she said cheerfully, unaware that Chiol's expression had darkened. He growled, "Care to explain what you mean by petty?" Ignoring that, Seo Hyun suddenly remembered something and asked happily, "I heard you're studying with Ant. And you even got into the archive?" Before Chiol could answer, a teacher's shout came from the front, "Attention, everyone, we will now proceed with class assignments. Freshmen whose names are called, line up in front of the instructor." The man's words put pressure on the kids below. Being placed in the right class would greatly affect their future studies. What if? "I'm getting nervous. If we end up in a bad class it's over," they fretted, sweating. Cheol understood that feeling, he'd been through it once. It's understandable. The academy's training lasts 3 years, so class placement matters. Each grade has 5 classes, the more talented students are placed higher. Across from them, an official handed Seo Hyun a slip and said, "Congratulations Miss Lee Seo Hyun, Class 1. Congratulations." She nodded and replied, "Thank you." Cheol wasn't surprised either. The official then looked at Cheol and continued, "Next is young Master Lee Cheol." The protagonist stepped forward, took his placement slip. The result left him too bored to speak, his displeasure obvious. "Told you, it'd be like this." But he hadn't expected them to be so brazen. Class 5, also called the garbage dump, where repeaters and those kicked out are gathered. Placement for lineal descendants is based on the naming ceremony's evaluation, while the review council is controlled by the elders' court and Madame Baekhyuan. They thought it worked against me, but on the contrary, it's better for me, I don't have to exert myself. With that thought, a man stepped forward to guide him, young Master Lee Cheol, Class 5, this way. Seeing that, Cheol nodded and tucked the paper inside his shirt. At the same time, he felt Seo Hyun's scrutinizing gaze fixed on him from behind. She was angry that Cheol showed no reaction to being placed in Class 5. Looking at her lioness-like stance, Cheol was a bit startled. "Wow, look at that face. Just by that look you can tell if I don't do anything she'll take matters into her own hands. Even though I'm totally fine with it." Thinking that, he waved his hand at her so she wouldn't need to say more, then moved off quickly. Around them, some other kids placed in Class 5 felt like the world was collapsing. Damn, Class 5? Will we even graduate? What do I tell my father? I can't be in Class 5, the family will die laughing. Watching the attitude of those kids, Cheol felt a bit annoyed too. How disappointing. Why do the Lee clan students act like this? At that moment, a greeting sounded beside him, snapping him out of his thoughts. "You're the youngest son of the main branch, right?" "Indeed, I wanted to meet you. My name is Kim Han, son of a small forge contracted by the Lee clan. It's an honor to study alongside you, young master." From Cheol's perspective, seeing a kid come up and greet him like that surprised him a little. "Kim Han? In my previous life I have no memories of him." Thinking that, Cheol asked, "But why me?" Kim Han scratched his head and replied, "Because you're a standout figure, I always looked up to you as an idol." The sincerity of his words made Cheol sigh, then continue, "Kim Han, is it, what do you think about being placed in Class 5? The sudden question made Kim Han's face freeze for a moment. But then he cheerfully said, "Well, that's probably the level I'm at right now, but who knows what'll happen later." He added, his face full of determination. Cheol smiled faintly and nodded, "You passed." Cut to the Class 5 dojo. After the freshmen arrived, the upperclassmen greeted them with smiles. "Welcome, freshmen. Please help us out, let's work hard together. And if you don't know something, just ask." Their enthusiasm made the new kids glance at each other curiously. Then the instructor clapped a few times to get everyone's attention. "All right, greetings over, pay attention here. I'm Lee Young-ho, the instructor in charge of Class 5. Today, since we have a new intake, there won't be a lesson, just a brief introduction." Young-ho spoke with a smile, and this was a face Cheol recognized from his previous life. Memories stirred in his head, he still looked full of passion and resolve. "In the previous life, he even tutored me because I couldn't keep up with everyone." Unaware of Cheol's thoughts, Young-ho turned to the long-haired student beside him. "All right, that's the end of the introductions. In-ha, please guide the rest for the freshmen." "Yes, instructor," In-ha replied with a smile. Then he turned to introduce himself to the rookies. "Hello everyone, freshmen. It's a bit embarrassing, but after repeating 2 years in a row, I'm still serving as class president for the 2nd year. You've all been standing for a while, you must be tired, sit if you want. Now we'll elect a class president. Even as students, there are times you'll be thrown into real combat, so the class president is a bit like the captain of a martial brigade. Unlike the instructor, who is only responsible for training and teaching according to the curriculum, the class president can be considered the person in charge of everything else for the class." Hearing this, a kid in the crowd raised his hand and asked, "So how is the class president chosen?" The question surprised In-ha a bit, and he turned to explain, "Ah, I forgot to mention that. I don't know how other classes do it, but here we'll hold a light match and then vote for the class president. Very well, then let's begin the matches. Because this is a contest of skill, magic is not allowed. There will be rest periods after each match. Before he could finish, Cheol's cold voice suddenly rang out, "Are you serious?" His tone carried a hint of challenge, which made In-ha a little flustered as he asked back, "Young Master Lee Cheol, do you have some objection?" To answer that, Cheol stepped toward the weapon rack, grabbed a wooden sword, and put some sense into them one by one. "All of what you're doing and all of what you've been saying, wake up. This is the Lee clan. If you want to play schoolyard games, don't come to this academy, go to a regular school in the safe district." From behind, In-ha hurriedly protested, "That was a bit harsh. We only wanted to resolve things peacefully." Back in Cheol's view, hearing that, he didn't want to waste words on these socially awkward kids. He drove the wooden sword into the stone floor and challenged them all, "You won't understand talking this way, will you? Come up one by one. From now on, I'll fight every one of you." Time passed quickly, now Cheol was panting like an ox from exhaustion. He propped the sword against the ground to steady himself, while all around him countless freshmen groaned in pain. Meanwhile, In-ha, who had witnessed everything from the start, could hardly believe his eyes. Unbelievable, how many people has he taken down alone? In-ha wondered, before Cheol turned to him and said, "Choi In-ha, call the next person up." Cheol said this while staring at In-ha with a sharp gaze. This made him a bit nervous, swallowing hard. "The pressure is terrifying," In-ha thought, then replied, "This is the last match." Hearing that, Cheol nodded and said, "Is that so? Then send them up, Choi In-ha." And so, their duel officially began. After just one clash with Cheol's sword, In-ha's teeth clenched tightly. A flood of thoughts raced through his mind. Why is he going this far? There's no prize, no value to this match. This is just a practice match at the academy. We're not even supposed to be using serious strikes. No, actually I know this well. I used to be like this. No matter what, I want to win. I thought compromise was another way to live. Don't assume accepting reality and growing up is the only right path. But I want to win. I crave victory so badly it drives me insane. In-ha screamed inwardly and executed a spin to increase the power of his swing. Across from him, Cheol made a similar sword motion, and he was still a step faster. "I win." With that, Cheol knocked the wooden sword from In-ha's hands, sending it flying. In-ha grabbed his wrist and dropped to his knee, crying out in pain. Seeing that, Cheol sighed and ended the match. "Phew, take him to the infirmary." No sooner had he spoken than In-ha shouted, "It's not over. It's not finished." As he spoke, he quickly snatched up the wooden sword and lunged to attack again. However, this rushed attack was also stopped by Cheol with extreme ease. The protagonist narrowed his eyes slightly, beginning to assess, left-handed sword? Using the left because the right is injured? His gaze was different now than before. Thinking that, Cheol channeled force into the sword, flipped In-ha's arm backward. Then he stepped forward and swung the sword in his hand like a baseball bat, smashing it straight into In-ha's stomach. It hit the young teen so hard he vomited fluids and lay on his back on the ground. His whole body curled up like a shrimp, and he was officially out of the fight. "Take him away," Cheol ordered, and two other freshmen hurried over to carry In-ha to the infirmary. At that moment, Cheol walked toward the group of freshmen in front of him and declared, "I have lived 1 second like an hour, 1 hour like a year. Who doesn't know it's easier to live comfortably? But if you don't risk everything and fight every second, you'll lose it all in the end. So even when I breathe, I fight myself and everything around me." Have you ever lived like that? That's what I call struggle. As he spoke, Cheol clenched his fist, his gaze hardening, his demeanor terrifying. Time quickly passed. After the class president decision concluded, Instructor Young-ho returned. He had learned what happened and couldn't help but scold Cheol, "You went too far. 4 people have broken bones, 3 have internal injuries." From his seat, Cheol rested and answered with no remorse for his actions, even challenging back, "If you want to survive in the Lee clan, you at least have to be able to laugh off those wounds." Responding to that, Young-ho said, "Those kids each have their reasons." But before he could finish, Cheol cut him off. "Instructor Lee Young-ho, even the students understood. Do you really need me to explain it to the instructor too?" People like you are rare in the Lee clan. You're a good man, but they are students of the Lee clan. If they go astray, then even if you have to play the villain, you should pull them back. Do your duty. Cheol's words made Young-ho's body tense, his hand curled into a fist. Time moved quickly to the next day. Back at Cheol's spot, although he easily dominated those rookie freshmen, it didn't mean he was unscathed. As he walked, he rotated his shoulder joints and complained, "Oh man, my whole body aches. I pushed myself too hard yesterday." Saying that, he glanced over at the whole group of bruised-faced freshmen, lined up neatly in front, as if they had arrived early. That gave Cheol some satisfaction, though some still showed hostility or discomfort. None of them avoided or turned away. If they were still as scared as yesterday, there would be no hope. But this didn't look too bad. Saying that, he slowly walked past them. But at that moment, our protagonist heard a few whispers, "He's here, that trash." At the same time, Kim Han's voice called from behind, "Young master, you're here." Hearing the familiar voice, Cheol turned and replied, "You're early." Kim Han scratched his head and said, "Yes, I was afraid I performed badly yesterday in front of everyone." Hearing that, Cheol offered reassurance, "We're still just students, it's natural to be lacking." To that, Kim Han could only give an awkward smile before asking, "Young master, if you don't mind, may I ask you something?" Cheol nodded casually, "Sure, ask." At that, Kim Han's eyes filled with resolve, and he said, "What should I do? How can I become as strong as you?" To that question, Cheol thought, "I don't even have enough time to train myself, when would I have time to teach others?" Still, he offered a hint to the young teen, "Honestly, I'm not skilled enough to teach anyone yet, but you have very good eyes, or perhaps a keen instinct. Yesterday you dodged my attacks 3 times in a row. Use that. I think you're better suited to technique than raw strength. If you risk everything to train what you have, one day you'll stand out." Cheol's sincere remarks left Kim Han dumbstruck, and he replied awkwardly, "Thank you." At the same time, In-ha spoke up to greet the protagonist, "Hello, young master." Hearing that, Cheol glanced back, looked at his bandaged hand, and shook his head, "You look pathetic. At that state you probably can't train, can you?" Hearing this, In-ha couldn't help laughing out loud, "Haha, if I decide to quit, will you leave me alone? Are you going to say some speech about fighting and call me a coward or what? I just don't want to hear that stuff anymore, so I'm out here." He snapped irritably and darted past Cheol. Despite In-ha's annoyed attitude, Cheol still smiled at it. He thought to himself, "He's changed, hasn't he?" Next, Instructor Young-ho arrived and gathered everyone together in front of him, "Assemble. For our sick today, 5 are absent without reason, so that leaves 11 in total." Saying that, he scanned all the students with his eyes. Everyone was bruised all over, which made Young-ho worry for them. They all look exhausted. And the atmosphere has changed. Are the students really this tense just because of one predator? Thinking that, and as if reaching a decision, he clenched his hand and said, "We were supposed to do basic fitness tests today, but given the current situation, I'm changing plans. Starting now, begin the fitness test." Time passed quickly. Young-ho's voice rang out again, "From now on, free training will be led by the class president." At this point, whoever knows what test Young-ho gave the kids, after finishing it they had no strength left to stand. Each of them breathed like oxen who just plowed a field. Not to mention them, even Cheol felt sore all over. He sighed silently, 10 hours just to test fitness. "I'm tired too, but I can't stop," Cheol reminded himself. At the back, during the break, the freshmen looked at each other and talked, "Hey, doesn't the instructor seem a bit different today?" Someone asked, and the person next to him replied, "It's from yesterday's match. A lot of people got hurt. If it were before, he would have let them rest." Ignoring their chatter, Cheol stepped forward and said, "Attention. No need for introductions. I'm Lee Cheol, your class president." As Choi In-ha said yesterday, the class president has full authority over everything except the instructor's orders. My training will be extremely harsh. Those who can keep up, follow along, those who can't, I won't drag along. If you're not satisfied with me, you're free to challenge me. Just hit me once and I'll give up the class president position. Enough talk. Start now. fight the person beside you. And so, once again, the students who hadn't rested long were thrown into trading blows. After a while, Cheol assessed the results. Looking at those still standing before him, he frowned. 6 remain. The others had dropped out halfway. Thinking that, he spared the weak for now and said, "All right, that's it for today. Dismissed. Good job." With that, he quickly turned and left. As he disappeared, a few jealous students began cursing, "That bastard. Because of him I'm suffering like this. I really can't stand that bastard. What sense does this make? I'm not going to follow that." Nearby, Kim Han heard the mocking voices and shouted loudly, "Cut it out. Honestly, I'm pissed too. But even when he's exhausted, we can't land a single hit on him." The students ignored that remark and turned to ask In-ha's opinion. "Hey In-ha, what do you think? Last year we had fun, right? Or do you think?" Before they could finish, In-ha interrupted, "Yeah, fun enough to get us suspended. If I don't change this time, I'll truly live like a loser. Even if my arms and legs get broken, I want to try once. Really, I really want to." "You all know him. That bastard. I mean, you understand what he wants to do, right? I'll try fighting this time. It might really be the last time. So wake up. Don't resist pointlessly or pretend you don't know." Having said that, In-ha turned and left, leaving the students behind silent from his words. Cut to Jianhua's workshop, where Cheol was now present. His body was covered in countless wires to measure some parameters. Now he focused his mana into his palm, producing a blazing blue flame in his hand. Seeing this, Jianhua beside him said with difficulty, "Stop. That's enough. You've failed again." Every time he tried to form an aura, its shape collapsed. She hadn't expected this problem to appear after reaching the 3-star level. "I wish there were records of how the ancients used mana," she said irritably. Meanwhile, Cheol pulled off all the wires, silently stared at the ring on his finger, and thought, "If it's from Wotan's memories, maybe, but I still can't read the next type." In any case, the trip to the archive yielded unexpected gains. There, Cheol had found a document about the weapon called Wotan. It said the thing was shrouded in black energy that terrified swarms of monsters. Even the kingdom's brave generals had been defeated. Countless heroes sealed it on northward 10,000 Demons Mountain. The king granted land to honor that achievement. The heroes, grateful for the king's favor, transformed it into a sword. They named it Wotan. Finding information about Wotan was a tremendous haul. Thinking that, Cheol's hand involuntarily clenched. Meanwhile, Jianhua's irritation lasted only 3 seconds before she returned to her usual cheerful face. "Anyway, you've touched aura. Making it into the 3-star realm on your own is truly impressive. The current deadlock will be solved soon. In fact, the amplification technique and the transmutation method are nearly complete." Hearing that, Cheol nodded and didn't forget to thank her. "Yes, thank you for teaching me every time. By the way, ma'am, now that I've reached the 3-star realm, what comes next?" Explaining this, Jianhua said, "You'll learn how to use hard energy techniques and aura skills, but mastering them will take a long time." Then, as if remembering something, she asked the protagonist with interest, "So, how is the students' training going? You always look tired." Cheol replied, "Training is normal." However, Jianhua couldn't miss his weary face and heavy breathing. She burst out laughing, "Is that so? If it's hard, let me give you a hand." Hearing that, Cheol's eyes lit up and he quickly asked, "Huh? How do you plan to help?" Opposite him, Jianhua revealed nothing, patting her chest confidently. Heh, you'll find out soon enough. Just trust me," she said. Time passed quickly to the next day. To help her nephew, Jianhua personally came to his 5th class, making Cheol give a wry smile. Hearing her say, "Just trust me," already makes me nervous. Unaware of Cheol's thoughts, Instructor Young-ho cheerfully announced, "Today we'll have a special lecture on magic." Everyone straightened their outfits and held their posture waiting. "This is Elder Lee Jianhua, a researcher of the Lee clan." Applaud. As soon as he finished, applause erupted like fireworks. Meanwhile, the goofy Jianhua scratched her head awkwardly. "Hee, I'm embarrassed. I don't like long-windedness, so let's start the lecture." She winked mischievously as she spoke, quickly grabbed a piece of chalk, and began presenting today's theoretical lecture. From the back, watching her focused posture, Cheol assessed, looks like she's increasingly enjoying teaching. Time flew, and then Jainwa suddenly clapped her hands to grab everyone's attention. Okay, the boring lecture part ends here. From now on it gets interesting. I'll teach the Research Institute's improved version of the iron line technique. Beside her, Instructor Young-ho, puzzled, asked, Huh? Didn't the lesson just end? What are you saying? The main part is just starting. Everyone, sit up straight in your seats. I only do this once, so pay attention. She waved him forward to assist, leaving the protagonist baffled at what his aunt was thinking. What's going on? He asked. From behind, Jainwa laughed. When direct descendants join the academy, they usually get support like this. But you have nothing, so I'm making a bit of an effort. Hearing that, Cheol was a bit moved and replied, Thank you, ma'am. Not paying attention to Cheol's feelings, Jainwa continued, Good, excellent. In theory, your power should double. Great, right? Cheol responded with a sigh, Yes, you're amazing. Meanwhile, Instructor Young-ho realized the lesson's importance and announced loudly to the group, Attention everyone. From now on we'll continue sparring by directly applying the magic taught by the elder. Everyone find an opponent. Following his words, the students began pairing off. To get back at Cheol, In-ha immediately stepped forward and offered, Young master, be my opponent. Last time I didn't hold back. He said, eyes full of determination. Cheol, who feared no one, agreed, It's an honor to fight you. I'll let you strike first. With that, the two lunged at each other, tearing into one another, making Jainwa, watching from the side, exclaim with delight, Wow, my kid is ruthless. Reminds me of my younger days. Thinking that, she was suddenly drawn to some whispering sounds from the back. I really can't stand that kid. Even if he's a younger son and faces discrimination, he's still different from us. Different physiology, plus unlocked skills, he's different from the starting line. One kid shrugged, and the boy next to him chimed in, Yeah, we tried our best, but what does he even know? From Jainwa's viewpoint, how could she tolerate hearing her nephew talked about like that? She immediately warned, Hey, you kids. Hearing her voice, both students jumped, stammering, M.I.M., you're still here. Without answering, Jainwa stared at them with a look like one staring at the dead and coldly asked, Earlier, were you talking about that kid? No, about my disciple. Across from her, the two students went pale and quickly bowed in apology. Sorry, we spoke out of turn. From Jainwa's perspective, her anger hadn't eased. She shot back at them, What makes you think you know enough to say things like that about that child? Please forgive us, the two cried out in fear. At that moment, before Jainwa could further scold the two, a student named Kim Bozong stood up and challenged, Isn't the young master clueless too? We've worked hard too, but we're always treated like nothing. Growing up in different circumstances naturally creates differences, right? To that, Jainwa shook her head mockingly, You really don't know, do you? Maybe it's better if you don't. If you knew how different that child's days are from yours, you'd realize your life is nothing more than child's play. In the back, Bozong, hearing Jainwa's slightly pitying words, grew so angry that veins bulged on his arms. He muttered quietly, What exactly makes that younger son so different? Fine, alright, I'll show you. Time passed quickly, and now it was break time. Instructor Young-ho's voice rang out, Training ends here for today. Hearing that, the students all breathed a collective sigh of relief. Meanwhile, Bozong glanced at Cheol resting to the side and sneered inwardly, See, what's so different about him? They keep shouting about struggle, but it's just that he's been gifted, different from us. Thinking that, a stranger student suddenly ran up and asked Bozong, You guys said you wanted to keep an eye on that youngest son today, right? But is it okay to roam the clan grounds like that? Explaining, Bozong nodded and affirmed, We're students, so it's fine. Besides, it's not like we're going into a dangerous place. That younger son doesn't even live in the main family's quarters. We can't let him keep overshadowing us like this. Today we'll see for ourselves. And so time flew until evening. At that point, Bozong led a few students waiting outside Jainwa's research wing. But standing around too long, Bozong couldn't help but wonder, how long has he been in the research wing? It's already 9 p.m. Elsewhere, a few students began yawning and suggested, "Hey Bozong, let's go home. Daytime training has made me sleepy. I'm exhausted too. Let's go." After all, nobody knows what that youngest son does in there. With that, some members of the group awkwardly left, prompting Bozong to grow annoyed and swear under his breath, "What a bunch of weaklings." Soon after, Cheol also left the research room. Bozong hurriedly concealed himself and then followed him from behind, finally almost home. He went to spring training. That area is reserved for the main line, he couldn't possibly be allowed in. Bozong wondered to himself, before the group heard a clamor of training shouts from outside. The sound made the group startle. They couldn't help but look at each other. What's that noise? Is that training? Then one kid in the group cautioned, "Bozong, it seems that youngest kid really is formidable. Let's stop." The young master wasn't wrong. If we trained as hard as in Ha then. Before his friend could finish, Bozong's hand clenched, and he snapped, "I never skip personal training. This is nothing special." At Bozong's words, the other two could only exchange weary looks. Then, not wanting to waste time tailing Cheol, they left at once. "Well then, sorry, we're heading back now." Ignoring them, Bozong remained tangled in his thoughts. What makes me different from that youngest son? I'm determined to prove I'm not wrong. With that, he began to wait in secret again, until the protagonist finished his training and left the training ground. This time, Cheol actually went home instead of lingering. However, before Bozong could react further, a beam of light and a loud shout came from behind, "Hey, you there! Stop right now!" The shout startled Bozong, but after the guard looked at his uniform, he said in surprise, "What is this? You're a student." "Master Li Cheol walks around at this hour every night, but I didn't expect him to be bringing a student along. By regulation that's not allowed, so turn back now." Opposite him, Bozong nodded quickly when he saw the guard wasn't giving him trouble. Before leaving, he glanced at Cheol's villa and thought, the lights are still on. It's already 2 a.m. This left Bozong contemplative. He quietly replied to the guard, "Then I wish you well," and hurried off. Time quickly passed until the next morning, at 5 a.m. at the private training ground for Class 5. Because he came home late last night, Bozong still felt sleepy. "Just as I thought, I came back too late yesterday," he thought tiredly, before his eyes widened and he stared ahead. At that moment, Cheol was already there before him. He looked truly exhausted. Even with the main line's gifted physique and abundant mana, could a 13-year-old endure a life of only 3 to 4 hours of sleep a day? "What about me? When I go home, I usually watch TV or play games to relax. I also do personal training, but I still get enough sleep and take proper rest and recreation." Thinking that, Bozong couldn't hold back his curiosity, he stepped up to Cheol and asked, "Aren't you tired?" Across from him, Cheol's brows knit tightly as he replied absent-mindedly, "So you were among those following me yesterday?" For Bozong, hearing Cheol say this first startled him a bit, but he then admitted, "Yes, the young master is of the main line, so he gets support, he starts off differently, and besides," he rambled on. But before he could say more, Cheol cut him off, "I've lived like this since I was little. Before joining the academy team, I did sleep a bit longer. If you don't get enough sleep, of course you'll be tired, so why do you push yourself to that extent?" Bozong asked. To that, Cheol offered little explanation, only calmly patted Bozong on the shoulder a few times and whispered, "You already know the answer." Having said that, Cheol moved off to one side. Meanwhile, Bozong felt a rising, overwhelming shame. In another development, while Patriarch Taishin was training, Steward Choi came to report something to him. "My lord, the dispatch for the mission you assigned has been processed." As he spoke, he handed Taishin a stack of documents. However, after Taishin checked them, his expression still showed some dissatisfaction as he said, "This still isn't enough." Steward Choi hurried to advise, "These are level 7 and level 8 dungeons. Given the current academy team's ability, it would be very dangerous." Despite Choi's counsel, Taishin remained firm in his intention. Food and weapons can be stockpiled, but people cannot. Now we need to create survivors. Hearing this, Choi stopped arguing, "I understand. I will proceed according to your orders." Also, I have another report to deliver. He began recounting the incidents involving Cheol. This brought a hint of pleasure to Taishan's eyes. The youngest did that. That kid had a different look in his eyes from early on, the look of someone who'd been deprived, dragged down to the very bottom. But leading people and changing them is an entirely different matter. Adjust the test content a bit. Coincidentally, the 8th son is in the same cohort. Raise the academy team's difficulty and see whether that kid truly has the qualities to lead people. This time we'll examine him carefully. He said with a face showing some anticipation for this test for the kids. Poor other students, they had no idea the academy team's test difficulty was raised partly because of Cheol. Back at Class 5's training ground, when instructor Young-ho arrived, he couldn't help but be surprised as training sounds rang out everywhere. I'm beaten. I give up. Damn it, it's not over yet. From his perspective, the students were split into two groups, one group running to build endurance while the other sparred with each other. This made his eyes widen in disbelief. Why were the students suddenly working so hard? You guys, it's the weekend and you're out here from early morning? Then there's no need to call everyone together. On the side, two students who noticed Young-ho's arrival stopped what they were doing and turned to greet him. Oh, instructor. You're here. Young-ho replied with an approving nod. Yeah, still diligent on the weekend, huh? If anyone's missing, go call them back, I've got something to announce. The student hurried off to gather them. Once everyone was assembled, Young-ho informed them, though it's a bit sudden, the first quarter evaluations have been moved up earlier than planned. Therefore, the instructors have decided to grant the students 1 week of leave first. Treat this as your final break and rest well. Finally, as he reached this point, his voice trailed off as he looked at the bright faces of the students. And he thought to himself, no need to remind them to at least keep up minimal training during the break, right? Thinking that, he continued with satisfaction, I trust you all know how demanding it is. That's it. Opposite him, all the students answered in unison, understood. Back to Cheol's perspective, being given early leave like this made him a bit suspicious. Suddenly granted leave and the quarterly evaluation moved up, does that seem right? He also noticed the students staring at him from behind and turned around, curious, to ask, why is everyone still here? In response, Kim Han and In-ha asked his opinion, we're watching you, young master. What do you plan to do during this break? Hearing that, Cheol looked back at the students with a dumbfounded expression, huh? Leave is personal time, why are you asking me? Take leave whenever you need, I'm not going to force anyone during the break. Across from him, the students' eyes widened as if witnessing a miracle. They whispered among themselves, I can't believe we just heard that from the young master. We actually thought he'd shove us into hellish training, like, who actually rests? And forced the whole group into a joint session. Of course those whispers couldn't escape his ears. Realizing their view of him, Cheol couldn't help feeling embarrassed. Could you not whisper so loudly? What do you lot take me for? During this break, should I try going back to day 1? Take leave when needed, rest matters too. I know telling you to rest won't make you sit idle. Handle yourselves, rest well, and we'll meet after the break. Cheol advised calmly, and just hearing that, the students were overjoyed, shouting and cheering uproariously. Cut to Jianhua's research room. After leaving the training ground, Cheol ran straight there. However, his arrival did nothing to cheer her up. She complained, we were told we have leave, yet you still come here, are you trying to bother me? I have a pile of research to do. To that, Cheol immediately retorted, you're clearly still messing with your phone, looking at trivial stuff. At that, Jianhua fluffed up like a cat and snapped, what trivial stuff? I'm reading the news that Hanmin has been recognized by the head of the family. Even his leukemia is cured. Hearing this, Cheol froze, his eyes wide and bloodless, and asked, wait. What exactly are you looking at? And the quarterly evaluation being moved up, was that really by your father's order? Cheol asked curiously, and when Taishan's name was mentioned, Jianhua's expression turned serious. She nodded and added, yes, the order came down directly. Back with Cheol, confirmed by Jianhua, he fell into contemplative thought, then this test will be harsher than I imagined. Right now I'm blocked by the mana barrier, to get past it I'll probably need to search for the next memory of Vo Tan. If the memory still can't be read, it means something's missing. I've tried improving things to unlock the next memory, but I still haven't succeeded. I'll just have to keep trying. As he thought this, he leaned back and accidentally knocked the stack of documents beside him, scattering them everywhere. Seeing that, Jianhua widened her eyes. Oh my god. What is that? Be careful. I told you to tidy this place up already. Ignoring his youngest sister's complaints, while Chiol gathered the report papers, he suddenly noticed a sheet printed with images of the monsters he'd encountered on Red Azure Island before. A passage in the report caught his attention. It said the decisive difference between ancient and modern martial techniques lies in their intended targets. One can infer that back then, human techniques focused on fighting monsters. This made Chiol ponder. The intended target, perhaps Demon Cleaver, was the same. Demon Cleaver originally was an over-the-top technique. Thinking that, an idea suddenly popped into Chiol's head. He sprang up so suddenly that Jianhua, who was eating a pastry nearby, asked curiously, "Huh? What's wrong, kid?" Chiol answered in a hurry, "Miss, I get it. I'll explain later, I've got to get to the training ground right now." Saying that, he ran like the wind, sending the papers in the room flying everywhere again. "That blasted kid," Jianhua yelled. Cut to the training ground, Chiol began transforming his ring into the form of a longsword, then thought, "Alright, now imagine my opponent, someone larger than me, a monster of a different species from humans. A gigantic beast. A technique that disregards combo efficiency, conserving strength, dodging, or defending. Flashy moves without destructive power or only meant to deceive the enemy are useless. The clear purpose of Demon Cleaver is to cut down monsters." As he thought, he began to picture the giant monster that had fought the nameless warrior before. Then he reproduced the Demon Cleaver move exactly as that warrior had done. His technique immediately caused an explosion inside the training ground, sending dust and debris flying everywhere. Having successfully reenacted the move, a plume of black smoke began rising from Chiol's palm, interacting with the Vo-Tan sword to read its memories. This brought a hint of anticipation to Chiol's eyes. "Okay, what will show up now?" he whispered. The scene changed. When he opened his eyes again, Chiol found himself in an unfamiliar place. He looked around and thought, "Where is this? Is this the training ground? Just like when I first received Vo-Tan. Why does the perspective only change when reading Vo-Tan's memories?" Thinking that, he was drawn by the sound of weapons clashing not far away. Glancing over, Chiol recognized who that silhouette was. It was the person from Vo-Tan's previous memory. Their striking speed was terrifying. Wait a second, what's that? When the weapon changes, does the aura change too? Not the person's aura changing, but Vo-Tan itself altering its aura. Chiol thought in astonishment, before someone's voice suddenly rang out, "Not bad, switching methods again, huh?" Hearing that, the warrior turned and said, "Don't spy on someone else's training." His tone was slightly reproachful. However, the newcomer who had just arrived ignored that and instead asked, "Since you have it, have you named those techniques yet?" The warrior replied, "Not yet, it's not even at the level of a proper technique." Hearing this, the stranger suggested, "Then let me name it. How about myriad transformations?" "Sounds not bad," the nameless warrior nodded in agreement. Then, as if noticing something, he tilted his head and asked, "Hey, did you bring someone else here?" At that, the stranger replied in surprise, "Me? No way." Their words made Chiol flinch a little. Then, without hesitation, the stranger suddenly swung his sword to strike. However, the attack was blocked by the warrior. The stranger shouted, "Planning to spar? What's the reason for bringing someone here?" Back in Chiol's view, taking advantage of the two of them fighting, he dared to poke his head out to observe the warrior's appearance, those eyes and that hair color, characteristics of the main line of the Li family. He whispered a sentence.